Good morning. My name is Renata Kowalczyk, and I am the CEO of Wilmington Alliance. I'm here to welcome you to our 2021 Yes Wilmington Summit. Thank you for being here with us today. I hope you will find the presentations and a live Q&A stimulating as well as action-inspiring. On behalf of Wilmington Alliance's board and our staff, we want to welcome all of our elected officials, community and business partners, and all of you, the attendees. Thank you for being here. Let's grab a coffee and notebook, and let's learn and imagine New Wilmington together. Events such as this, even in a virtual format, can only happen thanks to generous support of the sponsors. We are grateful to all organizations shown on this page, and especially to Barclays Bank for being the lead sponsor of our 2021 Yes Wilmington. But before we dive in this morning into rich content prepared by our three speakers, I want to share some updates with you from Wilmington Alliance, as well as very exciting new announcement. You may recall that Wilmington Alliance was formed as a result of merger between Wilmington Leaders Alliance and Wilmington Renaissance Corporation in August of 2019. A year ago, like many other nonprofits, we jumped into action in support of our city's equitable recovery. Wilmington Alliance is grateful for all the partnerships that we have developed and all the collaborations that we have taken part. We're grateful for unwavering support we have received from our investor organizations and the board. Wilmington Alliance's North Star is equitable economic mobility for all. We provide a systemic approach through lens of equity. First, in our commitment to support those in our community who are working in the trenches on reduction of gun violence, we have provided $250,000 seed funding to Community Intervention Team, CIT, to help them build much needed capacity to support our opportunity youth. Through those programs, they were able to serve last year 50 opportunity youth, both through the prevention programming as well as deep case management. As CIT grows this year through additional funding, Wilmington Alliance will continue to be a resource and a supporter, and will continue to participate in key stakeholder meetings around reduction of gun violence that include the governor, Christiana Care, philanthropic community, as well as others. Our second pillar of work are our place-based initiatives in West Central City, which we have been executing since 2016 as part of Wilmington Renaissance Corporation's strategy. Although sadly, we could not have community programming last year, either at the Rock Lot or our new 7 and West Park, our community garden was growing and thriving. And I'm here to tell you about 2 new construction projects that we'll be doing this year in West Central City. Our first project is the Kitchen Incubator. This summer, we will open our first shared commercial kitchen space in West Central City. We're doing that in partnerships with Grace Church, Riverfront Church, UD Lerner School, Food Bank of Delaware, and SBDC. The focus is on our local culinary entrepreneurs. When using this space, the culinary entrepreneurs will have access to wraparound services, training, e-commerce platform, also CSA shares. We will be able to also help them with becoming formal entrepreneurs. We are committed to serving 5 culinary entrepreneurs in our new kitchen incubator, as this will be our pilot in this new space and hopefully a beginning of many other kitchen incubators throughout the city. To support this work, Wilmington Alliance was awarded a competitive grant from National League of Cities City Innovation Ecosystem Program. We'll be able to use that grant to support our culinary entrepreneurs. We are also grateful to Councilwoman Harley for her ongoing support of this project. Just 2 blocks from the planned kitchen incubator will be our new space at 7th and Washington, which we call the Artemat. This will be a new community space as well as free to entrepreneurs retail pop-up space. Both of those projects are examples of Wilmington Alliance's commitment not only to adding assets to the community of West Central City, but also our commitment to supporting inclusive local entrepreneurship. This leads to our third pillar of work, which is centered on supporting our existing small businesses as well as the new growth through Black and brown entrepreneurship. To help weather the storm of COVID-19, Wilmington Alliance, in partnership with Cornerstone West CDC, and through funding from many organizations, including the state of Delaware and the city, had created Wilmington Strong Fund. To date, we have given out 136 $1,000 microgrants to Wilmington-based businesses. Of those recipients, 65% were minority-owned and 51% were women-owned. There are still funds in Wilmington Strong Fund, so please, to learn and apply, visit wilmingtonstrongfund.com. To further support our local economy and our Wilmington-based businesses, Wilmington Alliance had launched last year a local campaign, which we call Wilmington Made. To date, 50 businesses had signed up to participate. Be on the lookout for billboards and radio ads and other ways that we're going to be providing free PR and marketing to support our businesses. To learn more, please go on our website, wilmingtonmade.com. Also, in 2020, in partnership with Pete DuPont Freedom Foundation, we launched Equitable Entrepreneurial Ecosystem, in short, E3. It's a new initiative, but it's not really a program. What it's designed to do is to put an entrepreneur in the center, assess their needs, and connect them with already existing resources, including funding. As we're building this ecosystem out and we're learning about gaps in the system, we are also exploring how to close those gaps. For example, alternative sources to access to capital. You will hear more about that as we continue building E3. As part of today's program, you will also hear from two entrepreneurs, Marquivas and Gwen, who are currently part of our E3 pilot. Late spring this year, Pete DuPont Freedom Foundation will open an application for other entrepreneurs, and we have a commitment to support 6 Black or brown entrepreneurs in the city of Wilmington through this effort. Finally, our fourth pillar of work, it's centered around equitable workforce development. In 2020, we formed Construction Pre-Apprenticeship Collaborative, together with American Builders and Contractors Association, Skill Center, Career Team, and Generation USA. To date, we had 4 cohorts, and we have 10 very active employers who are hiring graduates of those cohorts. As an ecosystem builder, Wilmington Alliance constantly looks for best practices and explores through national networks best models. One of them was introduced to us through our 8-month engagement with Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, where under the umbrella of the program of reinventing our communities, we were able to dive into national models of what equitable workforce development and jobs creation ecosystem would look like. What came out of this exploration of what an inclusive workforce development would look like is the exciting announcement we made on March 18th. We proudly announced that with the $1 million of combined philanthropic investment from JPMorgan Chase, Wilmington Alliance, and 4 other organizations identified by JPMorgan Chase, have formed the Second Chances Employment Collaborative. We will work with Delaware Volunteer Legal Services, Hope Commission, Delaware Center for Justice, and Project New Start to develop and execute an effective roadmap for the placement of individuals who are criminal justice involved into high-growth industries, including careers in IT and financial services. Our collaborative organizations will help to identify individuals with arrest and conviction records and then work to mitigate barriers both to employability and employment. Through a collective impact model, the Wilmington Alliance will engage stakeholders to create a systemic approach that allows for the alignment of resources, that create accessible pathways, and include much-needed wraparound services. We are excited to dig deeper into this work, and I'm very grateful for JP Morgan Chase support. We are also grateful to DuPont and Tech Impact, who already stepped up with additional resources to support this work. I hope that this high-level overview of Wilmington Alliance's work and this exciting announcement of Second Chances Employment Collaborative is giving you all a chance to see how committed we are to creating equitable economic mobility for everyone in the city. Now, on to the main program. First of the 3 video presentations this morning will be delivered to you by Dr. Andre Perry. Many of you may know Dr. Perry from his regular appearances on MSNBC, CNN, PBS, NPR, NBC, and ABC. He has been published by the New York Times, The Nation, The Washington Post, TheRoots.com, and CNN.com. Dr. Perry is a fellow in the Metropolitan Policy Program at Brookings, a scholar in residence at American University, and a columnist for the Hedginger Report. He is the author of the new book, Know Your Price: Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Black Cities, which is currently available wherever books are sold. His research focuses on race and structural inequality, education, and economic inclusion. Dr. Perry co-authored the Brookings Institution Report, The Devaluation of Assets in Black Neighborhoods, and has presented its findings across the country, including to the U.S. House Financial Services Committee. Let's hear from Dr. Perry.
Hello, yes, Wilmington. It's always a pleasure to be back home, so to speak. I used to live in Trolley Square for a few years early in my career in the early 90s. I won't tell you exactly what year, but that's one of the reasons why I have all this gray in my hair. But it's a pleasure to be back, albeit virtually. But thank you, yes, Wilmington, for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about what I do and the work that I think is relevant to your community. And so without further ado, I'm going to partially introduce myself through my presentation. Hopefully you will be able to see my presentation in this, as I bring it up. There it is. Worthy of investment, the devaluation of assets in Black communities. A lot of this information that I'm about to share with you can be found in my new book, Know Your Price: Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Black Cities, available wherever fine books are sold. I work at the Brookings Institution. I'm a senior fellow there, where I study Black majority cities. And specifically, I look at the assets in them, the homes, the businesses, the infrastructure, excuse me, to really get a sense of wealth, prosperity, the overall conditions in which people live in. I'm actually going to begin this presentation at home. Like a lot of good stories, they always begin at home. This is where I grew up. This is 1320 Hill Avenue, Wilkinsburg, Pennsylvania. Wilkinsburg is a small Black majority community surrounded by Pittsburgh on 3 sides. And as you can see here, this home is boarded up. You can pick it up if you wish by agreeing to pay the taxes on the home. But the house is worth so much more to me. The reason being, that woman in the upper right-hand corner, her name is Elsie Boyd. I call her Mom. as the story was told to me when I was born, she made a deal with my maternal grandmother. My mother at the time when I was born was poor. She already had a child at 15. She had me when she was 17. She was probably abused, but a deal was made. And mom, like a lot of Black matriarchs in the Black cities, she filled a breach that government or the private sector could not fill. And so she took in kids. Now, when I was born, I stayed there until I graduated from high school, but she took in several kids, some of varying durations. Some would stay a few weeks, some would stay a few months. I would stay until I graduated from high school. One of the reasons why I had to stay with mom is this is my father. He was a heroin addict. He was in and out of prison for most of his life. He eventually was killed in prison. He was stabbed in the heart a day before his 27th birthday inside of Jackson State Penitentiary, a facility outside of Detroit. Now, for my book, I wanted to actually see how he lived. So I started looking at the conditions in all the neighborhoods and cities in which he lived. He bounced between Detroit and Pittsburgh. And so for the research for my book, I looked at those places. And to save a history lesson, I'm going to just go through this slide very quickly. But he lived in areas that were redlined. We generally know that the Homeowners Loan Corporation drew red lines around Black majority communities, precluding them from getting the low interest housing loans and down payment assistance their white counterparts had in the 30s and beyond. It set a horrible template of saying that Black communities, i.e. Black people, weren't worthy of investment. He also lived in areas that there was significant highway construction that barreled through his communities, both in Detroit and in Pittsburgh. He lived in areas where there was urban renewal, where the supposedly blighted properties were bulldozed, but they were never really rehabbed or new construction wasn't in place. He also lived in areas where there was significant predatory lending. In particular, there was a lot of rent-to-own schemes near where he lived. And then he could not move elsewhere because there were restrictive housing covenants that prohibited Black people from moving in certain neighborhoods. All of this was occurring. But I wanted to also look at just current day home prices in those areas. And so I started measuring home prices in zip codes, not only where he lived, but all around the country. This is a chart. If you look on that x-axis, that's the percentage of Black people in a zip code. And if you look at the y-axis, is indicated by the price on top of the bars. That's the average home price in Black neighborhoods, both the census and Zillow price. And as you can see on this chart, it's pretty linear. As the percentage of Black people increases, the home prices in those zip codes decrease. And in places where the share of the Black population is less than 1%, homes are on average priced at $340,000. In areas where the share of the Black population is 50% or higher, those homes are priced about half as much. Now, people will say that's because of education, that's because of crime. But those are things you can control for in a study, and that's what we did. We looked at that absolute price, and we control for structural characteristics. So we wanted to get an apples to apples comparison of homes of similar size, same square footage, the same number of rooms. But then we also controlled for neighborhood amenities. So things like education, crime, walkability, all those fancy Zillow metrics. Again, we want to get an apples to apples comparison between similarly sized homes in similar social circumstances. And what we found pretty much astounds that homes in Black majority neighborhoods are underpriced by 23%, about 48,000 per home. Accumulatively, that's about $156 billion in lost equity. And that's occurring all across the country. Wherever you see a magenta circle, that's where home values in Black majority neighborhoods are underpriced. Wherever you see a green circle, that's where homes in Black areas are actually higher than their white counterparts. In particular, the Philly, Camden, Wilmington metropolitan area, there's a 27 or 28% difference, roughly about 36,000 per home. And this is occurring in metro areas all across the country. Lynchburg, Virginia, for instance, 81% difference. So again, these are apples to apple homes. So if you helicoptered a home from Lynchburg in a Black neighborhood and plopped it in a similar situated environment in a white neighborhood, it would increase in value by 81%. Rochester, New York, 65% different. Jacksonville, 47. Detroit, Dearborn area, 37%. And Shreveport, negative 9%, 9.5%. Again, there are places where homes in Black neighborhoods are priced higher. Nashville, for instance, plus 10%. Boston, plus 23. But no, I just want to be clear, Boston is no less racist than Lynchburg, but the home prices are higher. 156 billion, it's a big number. It's hard to really feel what that means. So I'm going to put that in context to make it real for people. 156 billion would have financed more than 4.4 million Black-owned businesses based on the average amount Blacks use to start up their firms. It would have paid for more than 8 million four-year degrees based on the average amount of a four-year public education. Replaced the pipes in Flint, Michigan, 3,000 times over. It would have covered almost all of Hurricane Katrina damage, and it's double the annual economic burden of the opioid crisis. The reason why I put that last bullet there is because it's clear. If my father lived in areas where home prices were market rate or the white rate, he would have had better schools. Remember, municipalities use the assessed value of homes to finance a lot of education. He would have had better infrastructure, better policing. He would have had more capacity to start a business, to go to college. He would have lived in areas with better infrastructure. Without question, I never excuse his behaviors. He probably abused my mother. His drug use was partially on him. But it is clear that discrimination was an accomplice in his death. And it is an accomplice in the throttling of life all across this country. Now, I want to show you a clip. Oh, excuse me. I say all that to say that there's nothing wrong with Black people that ending racism can't solve. We're constantly blaming Black people for the conditions of Black cities, when in fact, things like redlining, racial housing covenants, segregation, predatory lending, all of these things impact neighborhood wellness. But whenever something goes wrong, we blame Black people. I'm here to tell you there's nothing wrong with Black people that ending racism can't solve. But I want to show you what denying racism is. A lot of people simply just don't believe that wealth is being extracted regularly. In fact, I really do believe that it's a lack of information about redlining, or lack of information about discrimination overall, that allows people to fill these gaps with conspiracy theories and stereotypes about the conditions of Black cities. I'm going to play for you a little clip of, this is Representative Al Green of Texas. I had an opportunity to present in the Financial Services Committee about discrimination in the appraisal industry. Now, we generally know that discrimination is throughout the housing market. We have tons of research on this area. And in recent weeks and months, we've seen numerous examples of appraisals gone horribly wrong when a white person stood in as the owner of these properties. Oftentimes, the home values went up hundreds of thousands of dollars. But I want to show you a clip to just show you the denial that is at play in many communities. Sorry.
If you think black people are being discriminated when their property is being appraised, would you kindly raise your hand? One person on the panel. If you think that, for fear that I'm not communicating well, if you think that black people are not being discriminated against when their property is being appraised, if you think they're not being discriminated against, kindly raise your hand. Okay, hands now. We're getting some consternation, I see.
Well, since that hearing about 2 years ago, we've made strides with the appraisal community. They really have done a 180 on this. I do think that more people would raise their hand at this time. But clearly we need to work on this issue. This is not just about appraisers. This is about real estate agents. It's about lenders. This is about society overall devaluing Black lives. I'm going to turn to another issue, a related issue, and that's business, because most people start their businesses using the equity in their home. And so if you have devaluation, you have less resources to start a business. Now, we know that Black people represent about 14% of the population, but only 2% of the nation's employer businesses, businesses with more than one employee. Now, only 1% of Black business owners were able to obtain a loan in their founding year compared to 7% of white entrepreneurs. Black entrepreneurs are denied bank loans more than twice as often. And when we do get loans, we pay higher interest rates. About half of Black businesses survived the Great Recession compared to 60% of white-owned firms. And we know that we're going to see similar numbers when the dust settles after this coronavirus pandemic, because we know that 95% of Black businesses did not receive PPP loan because they are sole proprietorships. And at the time, they did not qualify. And by the time the government caught up with this phenomenon, so many businesses had to close permanently. Now, a lot of reasons why the Black businesses are not getting investment is because people say that they don't have the similar service, the quality is not good. And so, just like housing, I wanted to explore that theory to see about the quality of Black, brown, and Asian firms in communities. So what we did was we looked at business revenue. We got that from Dun & Bradstreet, and we got the race of the owner. We then scraped all the Yelp data to get a sense of quality of all those businesses. So we could compare businesses that were owned by Black, brown, Asian, and white people. But then we control, just like in the housing study, we control for neighborhood conditions, spending power, education. We wanted to get an apples to apples comparison between businesses. And what we found is that Black, brown, and Asian-owned firms are rated just as high, if not higher. Actually, they are rated higher in the aggregate, but when you control for business sector, it's even. And so Black, brown, Asian, and white businesses are, in terms of quality, the same. But but businesses in Black neighborhoods get fewer stars as the neighborhood gets Blacker. Let me show you. See that magenta line right there, that's Black, brown, and Asian-owned firms. That white line represents white-owned firms. Now, in all instances, the firms owned by people of color score higher on Yelp. But as you can see, as the neighborhood gets blacker, the scores go down, and eventually the revenue goes down. The people are avoiding quality in the hood. And yes, I said that the revenue goes down. And this is costing businesses in Black neighborhoods, high quality businesses, upwards of $4 billion in annual revenue lost. Now, there's a saying in Black communities, at least when I was growing up in Wilkinsburg, I used to hear this all the time. They would say, our ice is just as cold. Our ice is just as cold. Now that translate that in this data, it means that our businesses are just as good. The elders knew that if you avoid quality in the hood, you distort the market in a way that you force high quality businesses to compete with low quality businesses. You reduce the amount of revenue in that neighborhood, reducing the ability of that neighborhood to grow. And so our elders were right. Our ice is just as cold, and we deserve investment. Now, how do you counter this stuff? One, you got to invest in people. Let's be clear. Like, if you invest in place, I'll go to that second column. If you invest in place and not people, eventually property values increase. People can't keep pace with the cost of living increases, and they essentially have to move. Now, we need in direct investment, meaning in entrepreneurs, homeowners. Cut the check. Folks need the capital. We need to remove the unnecessary bureaucratic barriers for entry into entrepreneurship or homeownership for that matter. Remember, our ice is just as cold. So when we have Black, brown, and Asian folk go through these financial literacy courses or some kind of special program in order to get a grant or a loan, it doesn't really make much sense because our business owners are just as good as everyone else. So Black, brown, and Asian business owners don't need any additional education than their white peers. So we shouldn't have to have them jump through all these bureaucratic hoops. But we do need to invest in place. We need to make targeted infrastructure investments in Black neighborhoods. Because of devaluation, you have less resources for infrastructure improvement, for communities to invest in beautification projects, and other activities that would animate the value in local communities. We also need to partner with businesses and developers to incentivize renovation and provide commercial spaces. In my book, Know Your Price, I talk about buying back the block, in which governments and developers really do need to concentrate business development adjacent to Black communities in ways that increase business ownership, home ownership among Black folk, as well as provide services to the community and to incubate high growth industries or businesses in high growth industries. But we also need to divest from racism. We need to remove the policies that extract wealth from Black communities, like several practices in the appraisal industry, the price comparison model, for instance. When you compare homes in Black neighborhoods to others, oftentimes you're essentially recycling the discrimination that has always occurred. And so those homes never get out of this vicious trap of devaluing the homes. And just as we score policies, budget impact, we should score for racial equity as well. Whenever there's a policy or practice put out there, we should really understand and study what's the potential impact on Black, brown, and Asian folk. In addition, we need to install anti-racist policies that encourage inclusion. Too often in the implementation of policy, Black people are not included. Now, I'm going to just share with you the upside of investing in Black neighborhoods, people, and businesses. Now, Black people comprise approximately 14% of the population. I said that before, and only 2% of the nation's employer businesses. But so if Black businesses were the equivalent of the Black population, there would be 800,000 more businesses, 800,000. And you can see here, St. Louis has the #1 or the best representation of Black businesses compared to the population. The Wilmington area is relatively low on that scale. You can get this information in the report to grow the economy, invest in Black businesses. But you can see all across the country, we only see really one dark pink circle where the representation of businesses compared to the population is decent. Let's look at some other stats. If Black businesses were the equivalent of the Black population, there would be 20 in the Philly, Camden, Wilmington area. This is, I'm going to focus on your neck of the woods. If Black businesses were the equivalent of the Black population in the metro area there would be almost 30,000 more Black businesses in the Philly, Camden, Wilmington metro area. Also in the Philly, Camden, Wilmington metro area, if Black businesses increase their average revenue to the level of non-Black businesses, we would see an increase in total revenue by $2 billion, $2 billion. If the average employees per Black businesses increase to what non-Black firms are, we would add about approximately 42,000 jobs. Now, if Black businesses paid as much as non-Black businesses, then those employees would see an increase of pay of approximately $978 million. And if Black businesses were the equivalent of the Black population and increase their employment to levels of non-Black businesses, they would create more than 750,000 jobs. You know, this is why I say all the time that equity is stimulus. You know, if we can correct for these market failures and get and invest in Black businesses to the point we're reaching equity, it grows the proverbial pie. Too often we think if we invest in Black businesses, then we're taking away from white businesses. No, we need to grow the pie. I study underappreciated assets, meaning if you just add water, it will grow. Where we need to add water is in Black businesses, Black homeowners. Now, I want to just, before I close, I want to uplift a competition or an opportunity for folks in Wilmington. We are Brookings and the Ashoka organization have just recently launched a challenge competition in which we're going to give away $1 million to some of the best ideas in how to stop devaluation in communities. If you have new mortgage products you think you want to model or test, if you have new credit scoring systems, or you want to create new zoning ordinances, we want to hear about it. Anything that you think can solve for devaluation, we want to hear, and we potentially want to invest. And if you're a funder, we want to make sure that as many people in Wilmington gets an opportunity to participate. So if you're a funder, let us know. We're constantly looking for local foundations who also want to participate in this challenge or to help support people in their local communities to make sure that they get some investment. So please just look up Brookings Ashoka Challenge and you'll learn all the details, but we would love to have you involved. And again, a lot of this can be found in my new book, Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Black City is actually not that new. But I want to thank Yes Wilmington for having me, and I look forward to working with you in the future. In closing, I just want to give the where I got the name Know Your Price. Know Your Price comes from my favorite play in the whole wide world, Two Trains Running by August Wilson, the great August Wilson. And in the play, the main character, Memphis, is about to have his property seized through eminent domain by the city of Pittsburgh. The city of Pittsburgh offers Memphis $15,000 for the property, to which he replies, "No, I'm not selling my property. I got my price. I know my price." I'm paraphrasing. But the point is that he refuses to give up his property for a low amount. There's another character, Hambone, who in the play. And now Hambone paints a fence for a proprietor, and the deal is he would get a ham after he painted the fence. He paints the fence, he never gets his ham. And throughout the play, Hambone says, "Give me my ham, give me my ham, give me my ham." And we don't know if he had mental illness before, but eventually he goes crazy and dies demanding his ham. Now, a lot of people are like, well, that's pretty depressing. But in actuality, there's a happy ending to the story. The main character, Memphis, actually gets $35,000 for the property. It's assumed that he's getting the white rate or the market rate. But the point of my book is should be clear. One, know that you have to know your worth. But what my book, Know Your Price, does is try to give people the price to stand on in multiple sectors. And so that's my charge to you. We've got to make the demand for change because we see that people will deny that racism exists. People will look for some convenient moment where things magically come together to end racial injustice. Well, if we can't figure this out after the horrible events of January 6th and so many before that, then we're missing the point. We've got to demand our price. Even if it means going crazy and dying, we've got to demand our worth. So that's my charge to you, Wilmington. Thank you for having me, and go, yes, Wilmington.
Thank you, Dr. Perry, for this powerful presentation, packed with research, as well as including very personal story. Equity is stimulus. This very much aligns with Wilmington Alliance's mission. Invest in people, invest in places, disinvest from racism. This is very clear path forward for all of us. Thank you for that. Next, we will hear from Linaire Richardson. He is an entrepreneur working to empower urban entrepreneurs and strengthen economic conditions in ethnic and underserved areas across the United States. Linaire is the executive director of the Center for Urban Entrepreneurship and Economic Development at Rutgers University, where he leads capacity building programs that have assisted over 450 New Jersey entrepreneurs. He is assistant professor of professional practice in the Department of Management and Global Business at Rutgers Business School. Linaire is also CEO of the Chicago Trend Corporation, a social enterprise founded by prestigious impact investors to stimulate and invest in urban retail development. To date, Chicago Trend has raised over $70 million to catalyze commercial corridor development in urban neighborhoods. Linaire served as the Chief Executive Officer of the Primary Economic Development Corporation in Newark, New Jersey, for 2 different mayoral administrations. Please enjoy this packed with solutions presentation from Linaire Richardson.
Economic growth, ecosystem development, racial wealth gap closing, generational wealth creation. These are just a few of the buzzwords that sound important and are in our news headlines today. The accepted definition of each of these words, in theory, makes communications about complicated topics clearer and perhaps more expedient. However, buzzwords can unintentionally dilute the reality of the problems that we want to tackle. I am happy to have this opportunity to participate in the 2021 Yes Wilmington event, to share perspectives and to challenge and to encourage you all to forget the buzzwords. I'm Lanier Richardson, and I just want to do two things. First, I want to spend most of my time sharing with you why I believe that we have a strategic moment to brainstorm systemic change and to create new growth business plans that will catalyze and accelerate inclusive economic development. And then I want to share some strategies that will foster inclusive growth, especially in urban, ethnic, and underserved areas. That's where I focus at. And that's where I believe if we make the strategic investments now, we'll see macroeconomic accomplishment and GDP growth in our region. So I think we all know the problem. In fact, I started to come in and do, the statistics again around income inequality, around racial wealth gap. And to the extent that anyone is not aware of the problem or needs better framing, I'm going to just refer you to a recent Brookings report. A guy named Andre Perry has done some great work around what would happen if people of color contributed to our macroeconomic growth in our economy. Now, I've worked in over 18 cities across the US, and one thing is increasingly clear. Wealth is created by owning assets that generate revenue and assets that appreciate over time. So last year, I started thinking about these questions. What systemic changes are needed to narrow the racial wealth gap and strengthen our economy? And then what would happen if each community that I was working in created a place-based business plan for getting more resources to people and places that have been overlooked and undervalued? How can we move more people of color and help them to own businesses and commercial real estate and other assets? Now, just a little bit about me. For over 26 years now, I've been doing this work, and man, I got battle scars and war wounds to prove it. I enjoy seeing communities create reality-based goals that are still ambitious. I've been in the trenches as an entrepreneur. I started my career building homes in the toughest areas of the city. I borrowed money from noteworthy community banks and nonprofit lenders and foundations. As a corporate executive, I've caused millions of dollars to be invested in retail development in underserved areas. And as head of economic development in Newark, New Jersey, I've worked closely with two mayors to bring over $2 billion of projects from the pipeline to the finish line. I now lead the Entrepreneurship Center at Rutgers Business School, and I own a real estate investment and advisory services firm. It's really a social enterprise that has raised over $20 million from philanthropically motivated impact investors and CDFI partners. When I look over the last year, I call 2020 the year of pandemic, of protest, and of political pandemonium. We all can look back on 2020 with hindsight now. The disparities were highlighted, especially in the neighborhoods and with the populations that I know need our investment. Black neighborhoods have not kept pace with the positive things happening overall in our cities. Does it look wrong to you? Does it nag at you? Or do you just think, look, it's a capitalistic society. We just have to accept that in America, there's going to be rich and poor. Some people will have and others will have not. Education, ambition, decision, good fortunes, victim of circumstances, blessings or the curse of birth, health. There are a myriad of factors that cause inequality. But I ask you today, what about the systems? What about the systems? So I look at my father and the systems who helped him to overcome growing up in public housing, Black man and poor, and ultimately becoming my first hero, my first urban economic success story. He went to the Air Force after graduating from high school, and that changed the trajectory of his life. He got skills and military benefits that allowed him to graduate from a community college and then get a job and buy a house and start a business and ultimately send my brother and I to college into the best graduate schools in America. And as a consequence, we escaped the hardships of the hood, many of them. And my father's grandchildren are on track to achieve education and economic success beyond even his wildest dreams. Now, he talks a lot still about the racism he faced and the hardships of discrimination that he had to overcome. But in my economic development work, in my academic career, I've come to appreciate the fact that systems can help. Systems helped him. High school, Air Force, community college, home ownership, small business loans, starting a business. And so in the midst of 2020, I started to have more and more Zoom meetings that we start them as brainstorming sessions related to what changes are needed, that evolve to what systemic changes are needed to help more people of color to find their way to economic prosperity in our communities. So I want to pause and pose some of these questions to you, both as leaders and to the people grinding in Wilmington today. How do we boldly change how we do economic development so that people who live in racially segregated neighborhoods have incomes and educational levels that are on par with the national average? How can we create more jobs so that we see fewer news alerts about crime and violence? What can we do to drive commercial corridor development in the neighborhoods so that we see more businesses that are community serving and that are employing local people? What would we need to do to jumpstart 100 or 500 new businesses and help 100 or 500 existing businesses in Wilmington to grow? Right? Here's what I like about brainstorming. If it's done correctly, we encourage bold ideas. We don't turn our nose up to bad ideas. We don't even judge as the list of ideas is being generated. Inevitably, a few remarkable ideas bubble up to the top. They challenge us. And in this process, I've also started to work with entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs of color who are in our community. And it became evident to me that in this process, we need to ask them, how can we help you? And in some instances, I've created this little memo. I call it the Help Me, Help You memo. Short little documents, less than 3 pages, where I seek to find out simple questions. What are you trying to do? What resources do you have? What resources do you need to accomplish your objective? I know it sounds simple, and it's more like the old school employee suggestion box, but the solutions are often found with the people. It's like anything else, the voice of the customer. Anything for us, about us, without us is not for us. So if we're really going to try to help entrepreneurs and help entrepreneurs of color, I almost want to have in writing, in bullet point even, how can we help you? So help me help you. Right? I put that into a memo. And the ideas are starting to really gel. On paper, once we see them, we can hone and refine them. We can help get projects, again, that are stuck or stalled for some reason moving. And we can celebrate success as we build momentum. Again, inevitably, a few things will be revealed that can help advance projects and really energize our economy. Now, when these things are done with earnest intent, you'll find that these sessions re-energize people, right? It helps us to really think about how to stabilize and revitalize the most distressed areas in our communities. It gives us hope that together we can do deals, we can change systems, we can adjust how we allocate resources, and we can create wealth and jobs. By listening closely, we will know from each other where to place our bets and how to invest in programs and policies and in enterprises. So I just encourage you to keep anti-Black racism sort of in focus, right? I got to put that in there. Again, if we're going to do inclusive growth, we got to put inclusion right at the center of all our work. The goal is to empower people of color to lead and drive and own new prosperity as is being created in all areas of our community. Secondly, all the brainstorming sessions and the help me help you memos will provide the basis for our inclusive growth business plan. And I like the inclusive growth business plan, but the objective is action steps that guide us to doing things that empower entrepreneurs of color and strengthen communities. The business plan will be our guide for how we do capitalism and community development differently and intentionally in a more inclusive way. Any good business plan has a mission, has vision, goals. So I mentioned 100 new jobs, 100 new business, 1,000 new jobs, $5 million of new ratables, $20 million of capital deployed. Pick the goals that are right for Wilmington. But we'll have financial projections and competitive analysis and marketing plan and the old school SWOT analysis, key position descriptions and budgets, right? Our business plan will articulate the action steps. What's the return on investment that we expected? What are the key performance indicators that will be measured? How do we monitor our progress so that corrections can be made? It designates key executives and recognizes and rewards success. So the business plan, anything that we want to accomplish, typically has some strategic plan, rewards, resources, vision. And I have liked tying in the inclusive growth business plan because I know they'll make our city, our region more competitive. Perhaps we can align this business plan with our ESG goals, right? We know that the neighborhoods, the Black and brown communities of our region, if they got stronger, our region would get stronger. So I'm encouraging Wilmington to develop an inclusive growth business plan that will carry it over the next 24 to 36 months. And I think it should be bold, but reality-based. It should examine and incorporate the best practices from around the country. Who's doing what to strengthen communities? Who's doing what to connect communities of color and distressed neighborhoods to economic growth? It needs to have truth serum, and that business plan needs to be backed by resources. Now, I want to just share a few examples of how the systemic change and the business plan work are coming together on exciting projects that I personally am working on in Chicago, in Newark, New Jersey, in Baltimore, Maryland, in Rochester, New York. Right. So first, and I call this work, most of it falls in the categories of vehicles and vessels, and data and deal making, and dollars, and the numbers and the narrative. So let me give you an example. So we're providing hands-on advisory services and deal-specific capacity building programs in a few of the communities that I mentioned. It's funded by leading banks and our philanthropic partners who have engaged us to provide advisory services and patient, flexible, equity-like capital to Black entrepreneurs. We are working collaboratively with our CDFI partners that are already existing in the community, that have been long-standing assets. And the goal is to add capacity both to the CDFIs and how they evaluate and underwrite deals, as well as originating new projects, but then also working with our community development organizations to help them structure projects, identify entrepreneurs, again, and originate and underwrite deals that can be funded. Our job is really sort of providing guidance, structuring deals. So there's a disconnect. There's all this good energy around, we want to help drive more investment. And there's true energy and passion in the entrepreneurial ecosystem and in the community of entrepreneurs, but there's a disconnect, and I call that getting projects investment ready, right? There needs to be someone on the team who can roll up their sleeves and work shoulder to shoulders with entrepreneurs on the business model, the pro forma development, the communication of what the opportunity will be to actually get capital into deals to drive deals, right? So first it's a different, old school, we called it technical assistance. I think it's a different twist on technical assistance. And technical assistance in some respects seems like, well, people don't know what they're doing. This is, you have an idea, there's capital available. What do we need to do to bring those together, right? And typically, I've found it's all around creating pro formas, to creating a budget, to creating the narrative around what return on investment will be. Secondly, focusing on new growth and next economy innovation. I've been having some fun shining light on new growth and high growth business sectors in our future economy. I call it NEED, Next Economy Entrepreneurship and Economic Development. My work is to encourage more Black entrepreneurs specifically to start, to expand, to invest in businesses that are aligned with growth sectors that will generate, trillions of dollars over the next decades. Healthcare, green energy, tech-enabled, AR, VR, AI. Legal cannabis, drones, autonomous vehicles, cryptocurrency, fintech. Now, people say, wait a minute, we're talking about elements of our economy that, we can't get everybody now in AR and VR, and everybody now, working on, legal cannabis, right? But this is where workforce development and economic development are inextricably connected, right? This is about jobs of the future, careers of the future, businesses of the future. And so I think there's an opportunity for us all to build confidence in people who are looking for jobs and entrepreneurs who are imagining their next venture, right? With information, removing barriers, shining the light on the nuances of these next economy business opportunities, making the connection. You got an old entrepreneurial skill or an old economy, business. How do I connect that old economy business model with the next economy business opportunity? I have fun always with my favorite joke around legal cannabis. It's legal in New Jersey and now in Illinois, around people who operate little bake shops, cupcakes, and restaurants. Like, well, all right, Cannabis is legal now. Let's bake some cannabis into our cupcakes. I always get my wife's eye roll with that example. But again, whether someone's operating an old auto repair shop, we have this great business in Newark, New Jersey. A Latina entrepreneur owns a car repair business, and we said, what if you could repair drones? What if you thought about repairing some of the autonomous vehicles? Just getting ready and just marketing your services in that way, that as the industries continue to grow, you're at the leading edge. You're owning and driving. So when we communicate to our economic development officials in New Jersey, it's all about how do we help entrepreneurs get to next economy entrepreneurship. Finally, patient, flexible capital, right? Access to capital always comes up. And again, I don't like cliches, right? So our brainstorming sessions really focused on what are new opportunities for deal making. So imagine this in Wilmington. If you could make a $20 to $50 million commitment to initiatives that will support new entrepreneurs, next economy growth entrepreneurship, racial justice investing in initiatives, and just purposely connect entrepreneurs to this capital, right? To get the capital there, it requires systemic changes in underwriting how the deals are done, right? First, right? Who gets money? How much equity is required? How do we assess risk? Just ask, what have we always done? What have always been the barriers to entrepreneurs of color getting capital? And what part of that system can we change it? I've had some examples where we've never lent more than 80% LTV, our CDFI partners. Well, we've encouraged them, under what circumstances could you make LTV 90%? And what would need to be in place? Can our philanthropic partners provide some first loss guarantee, right? That would allow more capital to be available to entrepreneurs. It's been really cool recently to see in Chicago, the Chicago Community Trust provide pre-development grants, right? So someone that has an idea for development of a lot or redevelopment of some type of commercial corridor, typically to get capital, that first $50,000, $100,000 of capital for planning and architects and engineers. And this is not just capital going straight to nonprofit organizations. This is capital that's fueling entrepreneurial growth, right? Just flexible, patient capital. Secondly, in New Jersey, we've done stuff around institutionalizing the friends and family round of capital. We've created a new angel investment, the Black and Latino Angel Investment Fund of New Jersey. And we found 10 local individuals who all committed, initially wrote a $5,000 check and then committed $50,000 of their own capital over 3 years to invest in growth companies led by people of color, to see opportunity different, right? And then ultimately, it's institutionalizing how capital gets allocated. Who gets the early stage capital? Who gets to launch their initiative? And we've now gotten some institutional partners. We've got a $300,000 federal grant just because we started it, right? Our best fund, we call it Black Entrepreneurship Survive and Thrive program, which provides no cost equity and growth capital for projects, right? For existing businesses to innovate, to add a delivery truck, to in some way create a project that's going to grow, right? So again, helping existing entrepreneurs as well as creating new ones. And then finally, I am loving our work around inclusive ownership of commercial property. We have now bought 3 shopping centers, and we have 2 more that we're working on that are in African American communities, where we did all of the initial work. We identified the property, we did the due diligence, we underwrote the deal, we structured the financing, we did the appraisal and evaluation and environmental reports. And then we offered entrepreneurs in the community and just residents in the community an opportunity to invest and own the project, asking ourselves to imagine Would the community get stronger? Would we be able to make an asset better if people had an ownership stake in it, right? So instead of that being a shopping center we have no connection to, we're structured a deal that allow the person down the street, anyone over the age of 18, to make $1,000 or more investment to have an ownership interest. This is what I mean by vehicles investors, right? This is what I mean by rolling up your sleeves and working shoulder to shoulder. And there are thousands of other examples, but they take intentionality. They take commitment. They take doing stuff differently. They take what looked like risk in our traditional systems to, have a different risk assessment model. And I said, take new partners. Again, our philanthropic partners, our banking partners, to do it in a different way, to invest in our CDFIs, to create new organizations. So in conclusion, look, it's about how we tell our stories. And economic developers and community developers are generally really good at telling the story. Hey, sometimes it's about both the narrative and the numbers. How many more people were putting the work? What's the return on investment? How do we show impact in an unconventional way? Not just jobs created and retained, but new numbers. Is crime decreasing? Are educational achievements happening? Is there other investment? Are there more people who never had an opportunity owning? Are we getting capital deployed in ways that are different? This is a moment for action without apology. This is a moment for systems change. And Wilmington, I encourage you. This is our moment. Make this a movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Linnea Richardson, for this presentation and many of your insightful questions, such as, how might we boldly address economic development and move it towards inclusive business plan and identify resources to execute it? Our final presentation this morning will come from Samira Cook Gaines. She is the president of Purposeful World Strategies, which helps cities and countries identify, incubate, and ignite their entrepreneurs and small business owners by creating structures for inclusive entrepreneurship and small business support. Samira serves as National Partnership Lead for Rising Tide Capital as they seek to expand the opportunity for business education across the country. She also serves as the Economic Development Manager for Tacoma Park, Maryland, where she guides the growth and development of the only designated opportunity zone in Montgomery County. Samira was the founding director of the Washington, D.C. Women's Business Center, which supports women entrepreneurs through training, coaching, and mentoring. In honor of her work with small businesses, Samira was selected a White House Champion for Change in the areas of entrepreneurship mentoring under the Obama administration. Throughout her public service career, Samira has leveraged her knowledge and experience to support policies and initiatives that ensure fair and equitable access to wealth creation and community economic development. Let's hear it now from Samira Cook Gaines.
Hi, I'm Samira Cook Gaines, and I'm the Partnership Lead for Rising Tide Capital. It's a pleasure to be here at Yes Wilmington to discuss inclusive entrepreneur ecosystems and how we support and build those at Rising Tide. I'll tell you a little bit about our organization. Rising Tide's focus and work is really around transforming lives and communities through entrepreneurship. And we do this because we see one major problem and a great opportunity through entrepreneurship. The problem is that we live in a country in crisis. Working poverty and child poverty are crushing our families and communities. It's devastating our communities of color. But we see opportunity in entrepreneurship to escape this trap of poverty. The problem is 1 in 3 children in America is growing up in a financially insecure household, and that's despite both parents working. Working poverty harms our children, strains our families, and threatens our communities. And ultimately, it limits human potential, which is really our greatest loss. The opportunity we see lies in the people who live in these communities. There are millions of Americans living in low-income communities, and they have the talent and the skill to really build and grow a successful business. But the problem is they don't have the resources to get started. They don't have the resources to sustain. They don't have the resources to grow. So a proven solution that engages their skills and includes these entrepreneurs in the opportunity is entrepreneurship. And we want to focus in on playing an essential role in developing inclusive economic ecosystems that take these entrepreneurs into account and help solve this problem of working poverty. So let's talk a little bit about Delaware. According to a recent report by Prosperity Now, Delaware ranks 35th out of 50 states for resident prosperity. This prosperity is really being hindered and dragged down by one major thing, and that's the racial wealth gap. That racial wealth gap is between white residents and residents of color. And when we talk about wealth, there are really 3 ways to create wealth in America. One is education, the other is home ownership, and the other is business ownership. So let's take a look at home ownership rates and business ownership in Delaware. Home ownership rates for white households is at 81%, for Black households 50%, and for Latinx households 52%. We are looking at a 30% gap, racial wealth gap in home ownership. Home ownership is where you build wealth through equity. Now, business ownership has a similar, tells a similar story. It's 18.7% for white residents who own their own businesses, 8.6% for Black residents, and 6.4% for Latinx residents. Again, the gap continues. Now, when we take a look at that business ownership rate, it's not just the 10% difference. It's really the value of those businesses that also exacerbate this racial wealth gap. So taking a look at the value of the businesses in Delaware by race, white businesses are worth or valued at $750,000. The national average is $450,000. So white businesses are faring very well in Delaware. But when you take a look at the Latinx and the Black-owned businesses, their values are dramatically lower. Latinx businesses are $150,000 valued, and Black-owned businesses are at a devastating $50,000, and actually a little less than that. It's about $48,000. We're talking about $750,000 ahead of Black-owned businesses and over $500,000 ahead of Latinx businesses. So business ownership is important, but the value of the business, which comes from the strength of the business, the resources that the business owner has and can turn to as they're growing and starting their businesses. You start to see that feed out into their value in the long run. So going from Delaware to zeroing right in on Wilmington. So let's talk about some of the challenge of this working poverty. Working poverty in Wilmington, we're talking about 1 in 4 people living below the poverty line in Wilmington, Delaware. Now, the national average is about 13%. So 1 in 4, or 25%, is a dramatic effect on the prosperity of not just the city, but the state. And looking at those numbers closely, you see that the largest demographic of people living in poverty are women and school-aged children. We're talking about women ages 25 to 34, girls ages 6 to 11, and boys ages 6 to 11. In a nutshell, it's women and their children who are the greatest population living in poverty in Wilmington. And again, 1 out of 4. So there are some 68,000 people in Wilmington, Delaware. 17,000 or more are living below the poverty line. And as we see entrepreneurship as a solution to this problem, and as a solution for women, as a solution for folks to really build wealth into their families, into their communities, we really want to think through how we can include all people, all communities in this economic opportunity of entrepreneurship. And with that, I really want to focus in on a client of ours at Rising Tide. This is a client from our Rising Tide Jersey City, New Jersey office. And I have to say, we're talking about Delaware, and these stats are about Delaware and Wilmington, but it's not a Delaware problem. There is a struggle for economic inclusion and shared prosperity, and it's happening all over the country. And this is how we have begun to solve the problem at Rising Tide Capital. Let me introduce you to Aisha Phillips, the CEO of Pink Pearls Natural. We want to emphasize in this video inclusive, bottom-up economic development solutions, which is community-born, community-raised, and community-driven.
One of the things that makes America so special is it has created this narrative, this story of a way of being able to tap into your creativity and be able to build something that is of your own making. What are we doing in America to strengthen that entrepreneurial spirit? Rising Tide Capital is a nonprofit that provides mentorship, training, and access to capital for entrepreneurs who are looking to start and grow businesses.
I am born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, USA, one of the best places on earth. When I was in high school, 17, I met my husband. 21, I got married. We had our first daughter, then had another daughter, then the twins. But we separated. And it was kind of abrupt. It was abrupt for me, and I didn't have an income. Now I'm 40, and I was with this one person since I'm 17. It was traumatic. It was really, really traumatic for all of us. I just wanted to have something to do basically for that summer for the girls and myself. I started randomly mailing one of those Bath and Body products out to my friends. Like, hey, give me your address again. And I would mail it out to them just to make myself feel happy, like I was doing something. And I would put it in these little jars that I had purchased. It just started out as something to do to occupy my time. There was no plan.
We believe that one of the most powerful forces in the world that we can use to fight poverty is entrepreneurship.
Our average entrepreneur is a single mom, 41, 2 kids, working 1 or 2 jobs and making about $35,000 a year.
A friend of mine, she told me about Rising Tide. I just think that they really, really are for the little person that has a dream.
So when an entrepreneur walks in the doors at Rising Tide Capital, the very first step is often to go through our program, the Community Business Academy, a 3-month program that enables entrepreneurs to learn some of the hardest parts: cash flow, bookkeeping, negotiations, marketing, in a way that makes it very tangible, not theoretical. We're really focused on, do you know how to run a business?
The change is not going to come from the outside. The change is not going to come from big companies. It's going to come from us.
It's about human potential, and that is already all around us. We just have to see it for what it is. What makes you unique and special in this world?
What we need is to awaken personal courage. We need to awaken community courage.
Growing up in Brooklyn, especially in the area where I lived, you didn't see many people getting up, owning their own businesses. I never really considered opening up my own business, starting my own business. I didn't think inside I was prepared for that. But my oldest daughter asked my second daughter, and they didn't know I heard them. She was like, "Do you think this is gonna work?" Like, they had so much doubt. And I tear up every time I think about it, because that was the moment where I was like, this has to work. Like, whatever this is, I have to make it work. Pink Pearl Naturals is a natural and organic bath and body skincare product line. I really want Pink Pearl Naturals to be a boutique brand. The pride that I have when I'm doing the work is because I own it, but the passion is because I like what I do. I like creating things from scratch and seeing the end result.
After they graduate from the Community Business Academy, we then craft a customized plan, the part where financial capital comes in. We have a network of dozens of lenders and other types of small business investors that can come in and can provide that catalytic capital to get the business up and running or growing.
Rising Tide, when you complete it, you have like this level of confidence that's like, you're almost invincible. I'm laying the foundation for a legacy. I want my daughters to know that if they want to start a business, that it's possible for them. So I needed them as girls to know that they could do something for themselves, because my parents didn't teach me that.
Within 2 years of starting our programs, our entrepreneurs see an average of 67% increase in revenue. They also see a 51% increase in household income. We also see a decrease in reliance on public assistance.
We work with over 1,000 entrepreneurs a year across 5 cities. We see a new Rising Tide business open every 3 days.
Being able to see the numbers is important, but in addition to that, we have the benefit of being surrounded by our entrepreneurs, and so we see and get to hear the stories of what's happening, who they've hired.
I mean, it's basically like you have a lifetime of support. That network, like no matter what, they're gonna help you.
A rising tide can lift all boats, but people need boats. So not only are we building little individual boats, but we're also connecting these boats and creating a giant armada of economic opportunity and hope.
That's an awesome story about Aisha and what she was able to give to her family. Just the piece of her daughters growing up and wondering, is this gonna work? Many of the entrepreneurs in Wilmington as we speak are wondering, is this going to work? Is this going to get us where we need to be? I really want to emphasize that at Rising Tide Capital, we believe in the following: the power of entrepreneurship, a bottom-up solution, and we believe that a rising tide lifts all boats. We've seen increased investment in incubators and co-working spaces, accelerators, all of those things, but we need programming that is both high quality and also high access. High access for the millions of entrepreneurs who don't see a Techstars or a Y Combinator as a realistic option or even as a desired solution for their businesses. We are talking again about community-born, community-bred, community-led solutions for entrepreneurship. So I'll talk to you a little bit more about the outcomes we've seen at Rising Tide. Our 2019 outcomes are here. We have about 100 businesses started, 200 new jobs created, about 400 businesses strengthened, and then another 300 businesses expanded. Those numbers are great performance and outcome numbers, but let's get a little closer to the people, right? So what's the impact of entrepreneurship, effective, inclusive entrepreneurship training on individuals? We have seen an 84% increase in business sales. We've seen a change in household income. I'm talking about checks in the door, right? Checks in your personal bank account. We've seen a 62% increase. Now, what $38,000 job are you thinking you can make a $20,000 jump in income in 2 years? This is what we're looking at when you create inclusive entrepreneurship programs where folks are able to utilize their God-given talents. And lastly, this number is really impactful to me because it talks about the problem in more of a macro scale. So the change in reliance on public assistance that we see at Rising Tide is 60%. Those programs are then open and available for whoever else needs them because our entrepreneurs are moving past that need for public assistance. And to give you a little bit of our progress in 2019, we have served over 1,100 entrepreneurs. Our survival rate is at 80%, which is greater than the national average of 50%. And we have about a 50-50 split around folks who are in business and folks who are still planning to go into business after Rising Tide has become a part of their entrepreneur journey. So we're talking here about building an armada. And the core of our armada is really based around our Community Business Academy. That's how we began the process of building our inclusive economic opportunity for all communities. And our goal really is to share this model that we've built over 16 years and share the learning and the success. Our armada starts with our Community Business Academy. It advances to our wraparound services that include mentoring and coaching, and then it leads to our Credit to Capital program. So we take our entrepreneurs through a full journey of support around their businesses. The Community Business Academy is a 12-week program that our entrepreneurs enter and go through, and they come out with a plan of action. That plan of action they take to their coaches, they take to their mentors, and we provide those connections to coaches and mentors through our business acceleration services. Those coaches and mentors then prepare them for their next step. If it's expansion or growth or even startup, and they need capital, you walk straight into the Credit to Capital program where Rising Tide connects you with the resources, the financial resources that your business needs to kind of start and grow and get a grasp on some of the things that you may not have ever considered until you started a 12-week program through the Community Business Academy. Now, this model has worked tremendously. I showed you a few of the numbers earlier. And right now, we're looking for a national network of partners. We've been on this journey for about the last 5 or 6 years, and we are working to share the model and provide the back-end solutions to kind of fast-track our local entrepreneurship initiatives. And I want to tell you a little bit about our first partner. Sunshine Ministries was originally a faith-based organization for youth. Upon the youth and they're located in Chicago. Upon graduation, these youth would graduate out of high school and not have a lot of job opportunities or just any opportunities in their neighborhoods. Sunshine Ministry stepped in with the solution of entrepreneurship. but they needed to know how to do it, and they wanted to connect with an organization that was doing it well. They became our first partner. Currently, Sunshine Ministries is, they have spun out a full organization called Sunshine Enterprises, and they are a full focused entrepreneurship development organization. They practice inclusive entrepreneurship, and they're now located in 4 different cities in the Chicagoland area. They're also serving over 1,000 entrepreneurs a year, and they are having the impact numbers that we see in New Jersey over 16 years. They're having those impact numbers in their 5th year, in their 6th year, and have done leaps and bounds past some of the early on lessons that we learned at Rising Tide. So this was about sharing the model and really planting the seed in our local organizations for a larger network's benefit. So the value proposition here is really a 5-year booster shot for local organizations and a private label approach that really drives local ownership and local innovation. And finally, that network that I spoke of. So that network is about peer-to-peer learning, having other organizations who are working the model, who are planting the model in their communities and seeing it flourish, but sharing those lessons and those pieces or nuggets of wisdom that kind of come from local folks implementing their own programs. So the Rising Tide model really comes in kind of four pieces. The first is the curriculum. It is a 12-week business, community business academy, and that curriculum is given, it is taught to instructors, and it is something that the leaders of the local organizations come to know and understand. And then it's the operational toolkit. That toolkit is really about bringing that capacity up as quickly as possible so you can get right down to the impact. And then a very robust reporting system. As you can see, we're tracking numbers around public assistance. We're tracking numbers around household income. So we have a really robust reporting system that we also share with our partners to begin to get those impact numbers for themselves. And then lastly, it's about the experience and the approach. We are digitally integrated, a turnkey solution for communities who see entrepreneurship as a pathway out of poverty. Currently, we are in 6 states, and we have a 50-state strategy. So we want to transform communities through the power of entrepreneurship all over the country. And our armada is going to be built in an inclusive economic ecosystem. We really want to emphasize the swelling of that tide to lift all boats. And it can't happen. You can't breathe life into that tide if we're not focusing on all entrepreneurs. The prosperity tide in Delaware is very low right now, but it can be changed. And this is the solution that has been working for us. And I'm really excited to share it with others and unlock the community potential that you have. So again, I welcome you to build with us, build our armada. We are looking for talented and seasoned executive directors. We are specifically looking for organization leaders of color and people of color who are in communities that have not received the resources and have not been included in the economic hope or prosperity of Delaware or even Wilmington. So we reach out to everyone, and we have a special interest in our leaders of color who are running these smaller organizations. We are also looking for place-based programs, folks who are already tied to the community but are looking for a proven solution. And we could not be here without our philanthropic advisors and our philanthropic program partners who are really believers. They carry the mantle of entrepreneurship. They see the impact and they know that the return is about the growth of our communities. So thank you again for your time, and I look forward to talking further about how we at Rising Tide Capital have been able to really build an inclusive economic ecosystem.
And now, here's a quick window into the impact of our pilot E3 program through the words of our local entrepreneurs.
So my name is Gwen Barker. I am the owner and CEO of Pellet Designs. Pellet Designs is my company that I've owned. It's a home-based business I've owned for over 7 years. So I took after my father's tribe, which is the Pellet tribe. And the Pellet people back home are known for being agriculturalists. So they're working with their hands a lot and they're using all the tools and everything. And so I feel like my business, because I make everything handmade, it's like I'm paying homage to my culture. E3, I was actually referred to them from NextFab. So I filled out the application to their grant opportunity, and this was my first time doing something like this. I've never been in this space, so I didn't know anything about grants or this process or this program. So the fact that I've been working alone, like literally alone for so long, so it feels really nice to have an extra push to be more disciplined and more organized and so on. I do appreciate them guiding me throughout the whole process. And not just kind of like, oh, you're here, okay, that's cool, and then like dumping me, and then, you know, I don't hear from them for a couple months. It's literally since the very beginning, they've been like guiding me on this whole journey of how to go about this process and what to do and how to respond. And it's just, I'm very thankful to have been in this organization, or a part of it. Through E3, through Tamra, I've learned different routines that I can apply. Like I take whatever is applicable and apply it to my business. As far as like apps and like different what do you call it, programs that I didn't know about. I feel like the E3 program overall just helped me get unstuck, because I felt like I was stuck in one area for one path for the longest time. So I'm just very grateful that I was able to have the opportunity to be a part of this program and organization, and yes. If I had to give an entrepreneur advice, it would be definitely mindset. Mindset is definitely key, because you can have all the resources you want, but if you don't have discipline or any characteristics of a business owner, it's not going to go very far. So definitely make sure that your mind is right. If that means meditation, if that means prayer, or whatever you feel, definitely set your mind right so you can begin on the journey of being a business owner, because it's tough. It's very tough, but very rewarding.
What's going on, fellow nerds? My name is Marquivas Gideon, founder and owner of Nerd It Now. Man, coming straight out of the P. DuPont Reinvent Delaware Foundation program, it was such a blessing to be able to go through 6 months of getting training on how to scale up Nerd It Now. But then afterwards, it was like, where do we go from here? And then all of a sudden, we seen our queen, Renata, say E3 is about to be pushed out there into the world. As soon as that came about, I knew it was a program that I had to get involved with. Being a minority-owned business coming from the E3 program that's currently gone through the program, I see it's showing me a world of differences of what it would be doing this on my own versus having some professionals behind me to help me order my steps as I continue to scale the company up. Again, between P. DuPont Foundation and Wilmington Alliance coming together, it was like the perfect way to create this master child of a program to scale up our businesses. And it's funny how I look at different entrepreneurs, regardless of the level of where you're at within your business, they're strategically making sure that the program's fitting where you are, meeting me where I am. And that right there has just been such a blessing for our business. You see, entrepreneurs often, we lean on our own judgment. We want to do things based off of what we feel. And often when you have big vision or ambition, you're driving this point home, you're trying to get there, and you're forgetting everything else that's going to come along with that. And it's right now where Nerd It Now is scaling up to be something much larger than it was a year, 2 years ago. A lot of things that I didn't put a lot of thought into is starting to come into pass right now. They connected us with Tam from over at the Wind Factory, and she's showing Marquivas, you want to purchase 3 buildings right now, and that's great, and I stand behind you. But before you do that, let's think about all the operational costs that's going to come along with these building purchases. Let's think about actually fulfilling jobs within there. Are you financially ready for that? Are you financially ready to project manage the actual renovation of the buildings? These are things that I would have never thought on my own had I not been connected with the E3 program. And now that we're able to take a step back and think, wait, we need to think this out clearly. Maybe we want to stagger the purchase of different buildings. So had I not gone through the E3 program, honestly, I think I would have took some steps, and by the time I realized I messed up, it would have been too late. So again, I think the E3 program. Often when it comes to the Black and brown communities, we're not receptive to help. We're a bit wary of some of the opportunities that are placed in front of us. This isn't one of those opportunities you want to treat the same. You want to take the E3 program and fully harness all that it has for you. Again, it doesn't matter if you're just starting your business a few months ago, or if you're 5 years in and you're trying to scale your business up. This is an opportunity where they're going to connect you with real resources, real individuals that can help make a game-changing decision for you to scale your business up, no matter where you are. You want to make sure you take advantage of this. Otherwise, it's going to be you that's actually missing out.
Educated, challenged, and action-inspired by the presentations from our 3 speakers, as well as the words from our local entrepreneurs, we will now move to our live Q&A part of Yes Wilmington Summit. And to help us with that is Ms. Tamara Valera, known to many of you as the co-founder of the Wind Factory. Tamara is the founder and chief manifest strategist of Manifest Business Consultants, a full-service business startup and expansion firm for businesses and nonprofits. Ms. Varela is the founder of the first African American and women-owned co-working space in the state of Delaware, the Wind Factory. She's also the founder of the Wind Factory Wealth League, a membership community of like-minded wealth builders focused on entrepreneurship, real estate, and investing.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I don't know about you guys, but I'm on fire with this information and how to change Wilmington and actually implementing it. We're going to take a quick intermission. I hope you guys have been taking notes because I need you guys to hurry up and come back for the Q&A session. This is your chance to get some more details, some more information, and actually get your questions answered so we can figure out how to take all of this wealth of knowledge and work together to implement into the city of Wilmington. So we're going to take a break for 10 minutes and we will be right back. Hello. Hello, everyone.
Hey, good
Hi.
morning.
Good morning, good morning, good morning to all of you. Thank you guys so much for joining us. For those that are coming back from our break, I want to thank you for coming back. I want to thank you guys for even participating and gaining the knowledge from these three awesome speakers. And I want to take a quick second to thank Renata and her team. Number one, for having the foresight to bring these powerful individuals into our space to let us be able to see what really can be done in our cities. I also want to thank Renata and her team for allowing the speakers to genuinely share their experiences, because now I feel like never before, your presentations helped us to see what should be done, what can be done, and after today, what will be done in our city. Wilmington is a little different than other cities, which I'm sure those that are watching understand the dynamics of our city. But if what I can say about all three of your presentations is that you made it really plain and clear and concise about the possibilities for what can happen here in our city of Wilmington. So before I jump into the questions, I wanted to thank Renata for bringing you here. And I wanted to really take the time to thank all three of you for your transparency and willingness to even impart into our city. And trust me, we're not going to just listen to you and then walk away. We are really going to listen to you and implement. So if your phones start ringing, thank you. So before we get started with the questions, the people that are viewing, you can submit questions via the chat. And please get involved. There's nothing like having these powerful people in your space and you walk away with questions. This is our chance to get some detailed information, to get insight that maybe wasn't covered while they were talking. So take advantage of this. We do have some questions I'm going to be asking, and then we're going to be looking to the audience for their questions. So do not feel like any question, is not right to ask. We need to get all of our questions answered. So before we get started, we have questions for you to answer as a group, and then I have some questions for each speaker. So I'm going to jump right in. So a common theme throughout all of your talks today was the ever-increasing racial wealth gap devaluation of Black-owned homes and Black-owned businesses. What practical systemic changes have you seen in other cities or even in your own that have started to narrow that racial wealth gap?
For me, I actually see lots of activities in cities all across the country. We see in Detroit people trying new home ownership models by essentially having philanthropy serve as a role of a bank and using new credit scoring systems. You see lots of efforts in and around Chicago doing the same thing, creating new zoning ordinances and MSP in Minneapolis. I also see many different enterprise zone type things where they're zoning for inclusive and businesses in an area, and to zone in ways that will incubate businesses all across the country. The problem with all of these is that they're just not at a scale that is making significant waves. Every city I go to, there are people doing big things, but they're not getting big investment. And that's the real issue. So we're not wanting for innovation as much as we don't see the investment capital that goes towards these endeavors.
And I'd love to add that, that's happening, as Andres just said, all over the nation. And the investment that I see comes really at a small level, and government is actually the folks who are taking some of the more innovative, more of the more innovative steps. For example, in Maryland, I know Tacoma Park has a affordable home ownership initiative. Now, we hear about affordable housing all day long, right? But the truth is, affordable housing equals rental housing. It's not a conversation about wealth creation. It's not a conversation about, mobility for those families. It's just affordable housing. And what they've done is, actually, knowing that their housing stock is, astronomical, they're right in the DC area. What they've done is the city council, so we're talking a city of 18,000 people. The city council has decided to put $200,000 down on projects just to bring the cost down of a house, partner with a affordable home ownership partner, which is in that area, their partner is Habitat for Humanity, so that they can not only offer this house at a lower price point on the market, but it's a perpetual affordable homeownership opportunity. And similarly with businesses, what I see, for example, in the DC area, is the conversation around affordable business ownership, or at least affordable business leasing. So in these large projects that have been city deemed, there's set asides for small businesses to actually locate in prime storefront locations. So I see it happening, just as Andre said, on a smaller scale. And folks believe that government is, slow and not necessarily moving fast, but some of those economic development quasi organizations, similar to Wilmington Alliance, they partner with the local government and help them bring that kind of innovative thinking to fruition. The investment, on another hand, is just not there in a bigger way.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is this. There's been this discussion around wealth creation and closing the racial wealth gap. And I think to have that discussion and not focus on ways of, racial justice, and not focus on racial wealth gap closing, and not focus on business ownership and property ownership. Wealth is created by owning assets that generate recurring revenue and appreciate over time. Now, that hit me like a ton of rocks about a year ago, that if we really are trying to close the racial wealth gap, we got to help more people of color own assets that generate revenues, businesses, homes, as well as commercial real estate that that generate revenue on a recurring basis and appreciate over time. And I'm really excited about, we launched this community crowdfunding campaign in Baltimore, where we allowed provided an opportunity for local, small, Black, and impact investors in general to co-own a shopping center, right? And it was a positive news article on a Saturday, and by Monday, over 133 people with $1,000 or $2,000 invested in the ownership, right? And so we now have 3 or 4 opportunities where, people typically would patronize a shopping, local community shopping plaza, but you don't. Thought of, can you help more people of color own commercial property and own businesses? Is something that, and then to talk about it in a way that's unapologetic around helping more Black people own commercial property and helping more people of color own businesses. That's something that's really exciting, and helping them get early capital as well.
So
Can I just briefly add to that, because people have a false understanding about what wealth is, and when we are talking about wealth, we certainly want people to live a lifestyle of the rich and famous, but it's really not that. It's really about having the protection to weather the inevitable economic shocks that will come. So if there's a COVID, if it's a Hurricane Katrina, if it's a whatever is coming your way, if you have wealth, you can lean on home equity, you can lean on a 401k, you can lean on savings that come from a business. And so it's not to say that, I want people to be rich, but that's not the point. The point is, I want people to have protection, because we're not protected. And and to be clear, there's a lot of people, middle class Black folk, who have incomes, high income, but not wealth. And so another aspect of this, there's only generally 2 sides of the wealth equation. I mean, there's the assets and debt. And so we do need debt cancellation. When you look at Black people in particular, where our wealth is, it's tied up largely in the home ownership and businesses. People who have wealth, that's primarily the 2 areas. And I need to make a note. We're under indexed in 401ks, the stock market in general, all those other assets that can accrue wealth over time. But even wealthy people who have wealth, whose net worth is above zero, when you look at their debts, it's hospital debt, student loans, another uncollateralized debt, the bad kind of debt. Not, remember, not all debt is bad. Like if you get a mortgage, that is a good thing. If you get a business loan, that is a good thing, because the assumption is you're going to make that and more over time. But I just wanted to say that, because when we talk about wealth, a lot of folks have Puff Daddy in their head, and it's not that. It is, that might be it, but it's more about protection. Knowing that you can go to work, come back, send your kids to school, and not worry that if something happens, you're going to have an absolute collapse.
That was a great point to make, and I appreciate you for interjecting that. On that same inequality of building wealth, there are conversations all the time, right, around like the inequalities, and they're usually an uncomfortable conversation to have. So what do you say to a CEO or a business leader or even a government official that simply thinks that if a business fails, right, that they didn't try hard enough or have a solid business plan? Like, how do we have these conversations that we say, that wasn't what really happened, and we need you to buy into what's really happening?
Oh, do you want to direct it to anyone?
All four of you. That's who wants to go.
I'm happy to jump in. So my background is that, I've been, a practitioner. I've worked for the government, for local government, for the feds, in this space. So I've had these hard conversations numerous times. First, I'm going to just be very clear. Personality and bias is real. So whatever hard conversation you're having, know who you're talking to and know where the opening is for a wedge of consciousness. The way I approach, my wedge always comes in numbers. It comes in stats. So it doesn't have to be me. There are very intelligent people. We got two right here, Lanier and Andre. They're very intelligent people. We've got very intelligent organizations that have already done this work. So when I'm talking to, elected officials who may think, oh, their constituents won't agree with this, or a director of some politicized internal agency, and rest assured, the small business agencies are often very politicized in the government, locally, regionally, nationally. I really do lean on some of the stats. Organizations that I go to would be the Association for Enterprise Opportunity. That's aeoworks.org. Andre just put out an awesome book. This is the type of stuff that we need to be armed with, right? Like, we can't just go in with, heart on sleeve because you just look like a Black person advocating for Black people. But when you start talking about a person of color advocating for justice and fairness and equity, your conversation is different when you have the numbers, when you've done the research. So I would say, know who you're talking to and do your research. Organizations left, right, and center are publishing this work. Authors are writing about this stuff. So that's how I approach higher ups, especially people who are struggling to justify doing the right thing.
Awesome, thank you. Lanier, Andre, do you want to contribute?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add to that, and I mentioned this a little bit in my remarks, is, this is a moment where we can ask and push people to brainstorm how we might do things differently, right? Call it innovation, call it systemic change. I think if we just spend time saying, all right, you see the inequality, you see the disparity in neighborhoods, the disparity in incomes. Let's just for a half an hour, I did this recently with a Chamber of Commerce. Let's just put on the board, what are 15 things we could do differently, right? And again, inevitably, 10 of them people won't get behind, but there's typically 2 or 3 things people could say. Should we do more, pre-development funding? Should we do more, not only small business advisory work, but also, early capital that feels like equity, right? That's angel funds or other things of that sort, right? How do we, have our CDFI partners have more flexibility and in speed in terms of being able to provide capital? And again, the moment allows us to talk about it specifically as it relates to race, right? I think in prior years, we always had to say minority, or even now in the entrepreneur of color, tagline. But I just want to say, look, if you really look at the problem, there's communities where there's less wealth, there's higher crime, there's more disparity. Those communities are typically Black or Latino. Let's go over there and focus on initiative and capital that will help more people of color own businesses and own commercial real estate that have the potential to grow.
Awesome.
What's interesting when I hear questions that you posed, that that the issue of a lack of growth is really a reflection of a lack of fitness. I have to remind many corporate execs how they actually stayed afloat. Let's be clear that, one, I mean, we've had past presidents who own businesses that went into bankruptcy several times and were bailed out. In addition, we just saw with this PPP loan fiasco that there were a number of white-led businesses that got support from government resources. And if we were honest, the reason why a higher proportion of white businesses survive is because they are subsidized by government entities at higher rates. And so in my presentation, I talked about our one study that we did where we scraped all the Yelp data. And what we found was in the United States, and we found that Black businesses score, Black, brown, and Asian businesses score as high on Yelp as their, if not higher, than their white counterparts, but they get less revenue because of the as the neighborhoods gets Black. Our elders used to say this all the time: our ice is just as cold. Because they knew that this was not about quality. This is about investment. And the lack of growth is really a reflection of a lack of investment. Nothing grows without investment. So if we want to see more businesses grow, we need to see greater investment. And if we really want to see investment go to quality, we would have much more investment in Black, brown, and Asian-led businesses.
Thank you. This next question is for all 3 of you again, but I would like Lanier to lead on this. Many neighborhoods and cities, such as Wilmington especially, we're in a cycle of poverty, and that poverty comes with violence. And so a lot of the communities do not trust when we say, hey, we're going to do a new program, we're here to help you. People have come to them and said that, and it doesn't quite work out like it's supposed to. So how do we build trust in our communities where they're not just looking at us as, hey, this is a new program that's not going to follow through, but hey, this is something that we're really going to execute on. And Lanier, specifically, when you talked about doing this shopping center as a crowd fund, how did you gain that belief in the community where people weren't saying, they're just going to take our money? We've heard these things before. So tell us about that process of building that level of trust to get that immediate type of response and buy-in.
Yeah, it's like most things that are clever sound overly simple, right? So I don't want to make this sound simple, but it's really, spending time and talking to people, right? So, when in my prior roles as head of economic development, and in my current roles as sort of leading community development initiatives, I spend a lot of time up front just talking to people, saying, what are you trying to do? What do you need? What's the resource you need? Why? Right? And the trust becomes, I was just saying, not saying no, not telling people that will never work, but really sort of narrowing in on what you believe can be investable, can actually get done. So people can have their dreams, and I'm not a dream killer. I would say I barely tell people that, their baby is ugly, rarely. But I always focus in on, what? That's something we could do. You really need this type of capital, or you really are trying to do this thing. So, I've in some of the community organizations, I've started to articulate it as, let's write together. I call it the help me help you memo, right? Let's write it together. What are you trying to do that I can understand, and then be able to advocate on your behalf to do what you think will do to help you, make you more successful. And again, the work of the Economic Development Organization is to really analyze first. I think that can get done. I think that makes sense. I can vouch for that. And then ultimately, to advocate. The more we do that, the more we start to communicate. Even in our Baltimore crowdfunding effort, we did probably, it was all Zoom, but probably 30 to 50 Zoom conversations with, 5 to 50 people on the line. It's saying, here's who we are, here's the mission, here's what the strategy is, here's what the numbers look like, and you just take all the questions. And, to do this work, you got to sort of go out there, chest open and ready, to spend the time to both inform, to build that trust, almost one person, one conversation, one event at a time.
Yeah. So as that project is going on, like you're going through the phases, and what are you doing strategically, maybe like on the transparency side, to keep that trust going full through the project? What are some of those strategies?
It's a great question, and we're early. So it's funny, when we raised our capital, I have, one of a family member who's a traditional venture capital guy. He says, well, congratulations, you got 133 Black, small, local impact investors. And then the second comment was, boy, I feel for you. How you going to manage that, right? So this question of, but that's part of the mission of the work, is how do you communicate? How do you explain, what the opportunities are, the business decisions that have to be made, to give people voice, to get a K1. What is a K1, right? To how you do the reporting, and how frequently, so we're grappling with all those issues now. Do we communicate with people once a month, once a quarter, twice a year, to what level of detail? How do you get people together in a way that the investors sort of know each other and all feel like they have some common alignment? But then also, how do you say, well, here's the decisions that, are generated based on keeping the project profitable. And here's this long-term perspective of how we strengthen neighborhoods and how we create wealth for each other. Again, all that has to lead with almost a heartfelt, I want to do this work. It's as much about the money as it's about the mission. It's about the relationship, and and again, getting into the weeds. If you're not willing to do that, this won't be fun work. But to the extent that you enjoy engaging, with people and answering questions and dealing with some of the unreasonable, requests as well, that's true urban community economic development work. And so I hope I know all the people on this call are passionate about it.
Awesome.
Can I just highlight one thing, and I'll be brief on this. What Lanier described, how I describe what Lanier just shared, is it's much easier to accomplish these goals when you're a member of a community.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't have to constantly build trust, and you don't if you are a member of a community. I mean, people are thirsting for opportunities like this. People are thirsting for it. That's not, we have people who will come to the table, but when it's somebody coming from the outside who that could be a used car salesman, that hasn't had any kind of track record, they're going to, rightfully so, you should be hesitant. But when you do the work of being a member of a community, a lot of these issues go away. Because I actually think there's a misconception about trust in the hood. There's actually a lot of trust in the hood, but they've been burned several times by charlatans and grifters. And so for me, it's about finding the people who can connect. I mean, you mentioned my book. Also, really, I wrote my book in a way that people, you don't have to be a policy expert to understand. And you don't, and oftentimes we use language to distance ourselves. And in this space, if you say capital stack, people are going to go, "What's that?" You really have to do a good job of explaining things in ways that people can hear. And that's not to say dumb anything down.
Right.
That's to say that when you communicate with other members of a community, you use the language of that community. And so for me, I think Lanier just explained that very well. When you have, when there's built-in trust to being a member, and when you have that, a lot of things become easier.
And I want to just, tag right on that being a member, because many, and I'm going to use the people of color tagline, right? Because it mixes, but everyone experiences life differently. And Black people and brown people experience life very differently. So we need to value lived experience. There's a reason why Lanier can walk into Baltimore, whether or not he's from Baltimore. It's not just because he's a Black man in America. That means he has a lived experience that other people recognize. You know what they say, right? Game recognize game. We know what game you got to play, what game we got to play. We know that we're all out here being told it's a football game, arriving it's a soccer game, right? Like that right there, the idea of valuing lived experiences. The economic development industry is not a very diverse industry. I know. I go to the conferences, I talk to the leadership, and they are often very, very much a monolith, right? And then you look at the program people, and it's, the leadership are white men, the program people are white women. You don't see a lot of diversity in economic development in our organizations, right? So I really want to emphasize that in order to build trust, there is something that goes along with not just being a part of the community, but having that shared lived experience. And sometimes, even culturally, you make those connections, as I have done in Asian communities, is because you spent the time. Lanier said, right? Like, time equals trust. Trust equals change. And if you really are talking about spending the time, something isn't transparent, somebody's going to say to you the next time you come around, hey, you told me this and it looks completely different. What's up with that? And you're going to be able to say, spending time in building that trust, this is actually how it goes down. This is what that really means. And this is why it looks this way in front of you. But behind you, this is what happened. So spending that time and valuing life experiences of people of color, recognizing that it's not just the diversity voice at the table, but it's the only way that change is going to happen. We need bridges. And that's who we are. We are bridges to communities. And you have to value your bridges or you'll never get there.
Ooh, let me just, one thing I gotta say, because that's the word.
Go ahead.
If these gray hairs and my beard could talk, now and shout out to Ronald Isley giving us gray hair brothers some
comeback. Y'all gotta come back.
Exactly. But you know, if my gray hair could talk, they would say, remember when you used to lead with yourself and your message didn't resonate as much. Now I lead with others. You know, when I'm on, I'm going to put somebody else on. And when you do that, I don't care if you're in Baltimore, Birmingham, Wilmington, what you put somebody else on, you're always welcome. And it's when you don't, it's when you go up there, you got all the great ideas, you're gonna solve it, and you might, I mean, you might be of the same hue as other people, but you know, you got to represent others at some point.
Yeah.
And when you do that right, oh my goodness, you'll be invited in, you'll be given dinner, drinks, you know, I mean, the whole thing.
Yes. Clothing.
Opportunities.
You are family.
That's what
comes.
That's inclusive, right?
Yeah.
That's inclusive economic development, inclusive growth. That's exactly it.
So, Andre, your statement kind of shifted from off of my questions because I have to address this and I want to hear you guys' opinion on this. And Samara, I have something I got to get back to you on. So you guys have me all over the place, but I'm mad excited. So when you talk about putting others on, between how we are as a culture to what we're seeing online through social media, there are major pushes for people to focus on themselves, like fulfill your purpose, go after your dream, chase your, you know, it's a lot of meism. And inside of that meism, tying it into building generational wealth and building wealth for your family, the problem comes that we have people inside of households that are chasing their own vision and dream and goal and leaving even their own family behind, right? So now you have, in our culture, if someone wants to be an accountant or a bookkeeper or a credit repair person, they see it as, I have a business versus this is a family business. Other ethnic groups say they have a family business and everyone is bought into that business. Everyone plays a role in that business, where our culture, I have a business and then here's my family. And what I've noticed is what this does is it's two things that kind of happen. It can cause division in the family because as an entrepreneur, there are things that happen that cause you to not have money to pay for things. And so the family's riding the entrepreneurship roller coaster with you, but they haven't bought into what exactly this is and how it's beneficial for our family. Then you have the other part of your children not being exposed to other opportunities. So you're wondering why your child just wants to be an athlete and a rapper. Well, you have a whole business entity that they could be a part of, whether it's, you know, doing data research for you or whether it's, you know, stuffing envelopes. But how do we get our people to understand that business creation is building wealth? The greatest part of that wealth is the knowledge from running the business, and get your family into this so that it can be a holistic wealth building, legacy building opportunity. How do we change our community's mindsets around that?
And whatever you say, I've got something to add to this, Andre. So go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
You go.
So I want to. The reason why I say I want to add is I want to just preview one thing. So, well, we're in early stage of sort of branding something called hashtag WOT. What hashtag? What we own this. Okay. And the we is a bigger we. It's not. Let's assume the four of us own the business or own an asset.
Yeah.
What we are trying to sort of create as an ethos is the we own this. It's just not the four of us, but it's our kids. Yeah. It's our family. It's, you know, man, I went to school with, you know, Andre, and, you know, we own this, right?
Yes.
So this real concept of, you know, can we build a pride of ownership that then gets all of those messages, you know, communicated. When I grew up, my father owned a bar. We cleaned up the parking lot. We stocked the beer coolers. You know, that was just, we DJ'd if the DJ didn't show up, you know, even at age 16 or whatever, right? We figured out how to be a part of that. Yeah. I have another little story where we were walking down the street with my nephew, and they had opened a little account at a Black-owned bank, Harvard Bank, and they put, you know, $1,000 in, $100 in. And the nephew, even at 8 years old, said, you know, I own that bank, right? So that thought of we having equity stake and connection, and then getting the business lessons, what it means to see other people of color own and run and manage and contract with other businesses and lease to other businesses and hire professional service providers. I just think there's a moment now, right? Moment movement. There's a moment now where this collective we, I think can mean more than just I own a business, you own a business, the four of us own a business. Yeah, I'm hoping that you can really build some ethos around this, collective we.
Yeah, well, go ahead, Andre.
Yeah, but I want to just make sure that we don't conflate American culture with Black culture. Black culture has always been more about the collective. When you look at, we give more money away, more of our money than any other group.
That's good.
We live together more than any other group, intergenerational housing. So we have to. Why you see, but you see this in American culture.
Yeah.
Me. Look at me. That's just American culture. Where it differs is that Black people don't have wealth. And when you don't have wealth, you're going to have more sole proprietorships. You're going to have more individual efforts. And that's what you see. You don't see, and also businesses, businesses are structured in that way. It's a lot easier to get an individual LLC and go about that route. We don't have really a lot of cooperative models, as Lanier described, that we're very familiar with, but we need it. Actually, Black culture fits more with a cooperative model than sort of an individual contracting regime. So for me, it's always, we are part of American culture. Don't ever get that twisted. But when you have wealth, when you don't have wealth, what it looks like is, look at this, modicum of value, this little bit of whatever I have something, but in reality, we're all striving for that protection. And one more thing is that there is a deep selfishness with racism. There has been wealth hoarding. Like you don't get a Bezos. You don't get a Gates without extreme exploitation, selfishness. So we can't even come close to that. But what I do always worry about with Black folk, Latinos, Asian folk, that we're not Eurocentric. But you stay in America long enough, you will start to reflect that sort of ethos of America, which is very individualistic. And so I just wanted to make sure that that's an American value.
Thank you for sharing that.
And I just want to jump in and call out a Kwanzaa principle since we're here, right? Like this is something African Americans came up with, right? Literally created not less than 40 years ago, right? The third principle, Ujamaa, is cooperative economics. Literally teaching cooperative economics. This is something that we do value. And, I'll say when your wealth is in your people and when your wealth is in your knowledge and your own personal ingenuity, and it's not in the bank, you become much more interdependent. So I would say that, again, it's the opportunity and the fair play that kind of steps on, kind of crushes the idea that we can even build something that big. Because I know the folks at, the folks at the hair salon, at the barbershop, the folks at the caterer, their kids are working. Their kids are working, like as Lanier mentioned about his upbringing. The entrepreneurs I know and their families are working. Now, can you trust your second cousin or even your first cousin to do everything? No, not always, but that's across the board. That's not a Black issue. I would say that our businesses of color, specifically Black owned and Latinx owned, are very interdependent. And that's a survival thing. And I think it's a heart and soul thing. I think in contradiction to American values of individualism, we have cultural values of community. That's our word. I recognize that, America uses that, but community, we've been talking about community and our people and our hood, like that's been us and it still is us. I just think the opportunities are lacking for us to propel that.
And you know what Auntie Cook Gaines and Uncle Richardson represent?
All day.
They represent Rosewood. They represent Black Wall Street. They represent Richmond. They represent 17th Street in Birmingham. We've always found ways to do the collective. But
and let me be clear, Andre. I'm Auntie Mira and I'm TT Mira.
Yeah,
that's where my community comes from.
That's right.
I'm TT Mira just like I'm Auntie Mira. And it's been that way. So I do think, again, we've had it. We've got the history. Andre, you're listing our folks, right? The issue is the opportunity to actually scale. Make our businesses as big as the others. It's just not there. It's the systemic barriers, right? And then it's the general bias. It's you walked in not looking like what I needed you to look like.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to ask one more question to Samara, and then I'm going to check in with the chat to see if we have anything, and then I'll double back to my questions because I can talk to you all for days. So going back to what you mentioned about the shared living experience and about the bridge. So as a single mom raising 4 kids, having to navigate that process of being on every type of public assistance to transitioning to being fully self-sufficient, right? When you're working with your clients, there is that gap of, if I make too much, I'm going to lose this benefit. Is it worth it? If I don't make enough, I can keep my medical insurance. So can you just share with the viewers, and I'm hoping that there are some politicians and people that make decisions on here to hear your strategies, but what are some of the techniques, strategies, or processes that you help your participants navigate to get over the bridge all the way enough to where it's not detrimental to them, like having to lose childcare or having to lose, food stamps in the process? Like, what does that look like?
So, and thank you for that, because it's it's a reality. It is a reality. There are folks who can't make one more dollar without losing, without losing, food stamp credits, right? So what I really recommend is, and this is practitioner experience, we start training businesses and providing TA, and we talk about things like break-even analysis. There is so much more to a break-even, right? So when we're talking about breaking even, we're not talking about what you spent versus what you gained. We're talking about the entire picture here. So, for example, I had a conversation with a woman who was a cleaner, and she got kind of a bigger contract. She said, now, if I take this contract, the child care credits that I have, and then my baby is with me and I can't go do the contract. So what do we do now? Just those conversations there of, we actually planned for this. I said, okay, well, let's go through the network. Let's go through the childcare network. Who can you pay? That's the same amount that you pay to this childcare or less, who can take care of this child. We strategize beyond the business. And, my experience is with women entrepreneurs. Women are I spend a lot of time with that piece right there. So women are the caregivers of our world, right? Even if you don't have your own kids, you're taking care of somebody else's, you're taking care of parents, you're taking care of partners, next door neighbors' dogs. I mean, you feeding walking dogs that don't belong to you. My own experiences. No, I don't have dogs. Let me just be clear. Why am I walking this dog? Well, listen, somebody need help. So for me, I really do think it's planning that goes beyond kind of this traditional. And again, when you think about American culture, there's this traditional, here are the 5 steps of your business plan. Here are when you think about a business that happens for a woman, for example, you have to talk to her about everything that first stands in the way of this new opportunity. And if you don't solve for that first, for that over there and that over there first, you can't even talk about the opportunity. So for me, it really is, I mean, I can't tell you the level of life coaching and organizing and planning that I have done just to say, go ahead and apply for this contract. Go ahead and, do this marketing. You got to solve for the life challenges first. And the life challenges are the same, there's 4 big categories, right? Transportation, childcare, food, right? And then utilities. Like those are the 4 things that I constantly have to solve for, right? Is the phone even going to be on to get the call? Can you feed these kids? Can you feed yourself? Can you get there? Transportation. All of those 4 major things need to be solved for before you can even talk to an entrepreneur about an opportunity. You have to be able to realistically execute on the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for breaking that down. I think that especially as a business consultant, I always say 10% of what I do is the strategy in the business. 90% is everything that you just said. It really becomes ministry in a sense.
Exactly.
The inner man and then all of the other barriers, and then we're going to get to the strategy because the strategy works regardless.
Right. Exactly.
But thank you for sharing your insight with actually taking groups of people through that process. Because even in employment, employers don't understand that type of barrier to saying yes to an opportunity. And it's like, hey, we offered you a better job and you declined. And it's like, the opportunity wasn't enough to get me over the threshold. Yep. So it looks like an awesome opportunity to you, but it would set me back traumatically.
Right. Correct. That break even goes well beyond what you account for in the financial statement. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to check in with Tish. Tish, are you there? Do we have questions in the chat?
We do.
Awesome.
The first question is, how do we also serve those sectors of the community to ensure that growth is not exclusive to white-collar businesses? Could you hear me?
Yes. I mean, let me take a little bit of that, and I say this all the time, and why I'm actually very high on this Biden's jobs plan infrastructure bill is because he's explicitly stating that 40% of this what is it, $3 trillion infrastructure bill will be directed to communities that have been historically disenfranchised. Now, that's not the point. If we can figure out ways to direct capital to actual people, so to the potential homeowner, to the business owner, Black business owner, to the other folks, and not just direct it to brick and mortar. Because you invest in brick and mortar, guess what happens? Property values increase, people are pushed out. And so with this plan, we need to demand that there's regulations that it will actually go to people in those communities. And if you do that, then we're much more likely to have more owners. And if you have more owners, you have more people who are essentially more shareholders in the development in a community. And so for me, it's about figuring out ways to direct capital to actual people in the hood who happen to be Black, brown, or Asian in the hood.
So can I just add something to that, especially because to address with Wilmington. Everything you just said is awesome, Andre. And then the other thing I would just say to add to that for our Wilmington people that are watching, some things that we need to focus on is making sure that when those funds are available to people, that the information is getting out to our community. What happens here in Wilmington is that Black and brown businesses find out late or like the day before or the week after. And so organizations like Wilmington Alliance, on the Wind Factory, we're really trying to make sure that we're getting that information out to the masses as swiftly as possible and empowering people to be able to apply. But for those of you that are on here, the only way that's going to happen is if we make the commitment, you as an attendee of this event, to push this information to people that you know. So when Renata sends out emails, making sure that it's getting to the people that it needs to get to, so that we can take advantage and be in a position to apply in a timely fashion.
And I'll say for the organizations and organization leaders who are already on this call, I'm going to go back to those bridge people.
Yeah.
Find somebody in that community who is the networker, who is the wheel for the spokes. Find somebody. How are you going to find somebody? You got to get on the street. You got to get out there. You got to say, hey, introduce me to. You got to ask the question. It's sales 101, right? Like after you close a sale, you say, do you have anybody else you think I should be talking to? Right? So you go ahead and find that bridge, because once you give that message to that person, they're not going to hold it. They're going to pass it around, and they'll recognize the importance of that role and that position. I'll also say I've had some really great conversations with Renata around informal entrepreneurship, the gray market, right? Informal entrepreneurship is you don't have a business license. Yeah. That does not mean you have not been in business for 15 years. It means you don't have a business license. The woman I bought my prom dress from, she works out of her house. Okay. The stylist that I went to all through college, she worked out of her house. So this idea of informal entrepreneurship and what we think as credible businesses becomes a brand new barrier. So for me, especially around these policies, et cetera, that are coming out, PPP was like, a complete debacle that showed us this, right? Do we have to have a business license? Some of these things that we always assume we need, we don't. We're just following practices that were, standardized practice. So please submit your business license in order for this local grant. Well, here's my question. Do you really need a business license? Do you? Or do you need a receipt that it was used for a business, activity or a business purchase? Do you need a business license, really? If you are serious about serving businesses that aren't these, established folks, you need to take away the barriers that are specifically set up for those people and not these people. If it's about business is, for me, are you making a sale? Are you making a sale? You are in business. Let's not talk about whether or not you're formal or informal just yet, but let's talk about you being in business. You have a product or a service and somebody pays you for it, you're in business. So we can move from there.
Right. That was good. Tish?
How do we boldly change how we do economic development?
So, I love that question. I think there's a focus right now on the money, right, and on capital. And we've seen this on a macro basis, even as it related to, I think it became clear to me that there was a change happening when, the Amazon was making its location decision, right? That people start saying, well, look, why would we provide incentive to Amazon and we don't provide incentive to our local restaurant down the street that wants to open a second location, right? And so my sense is, that empowered folks in economic development to just think different. Like, all right, you know what, if we're investing in local ownership, what role how could we use the capital that we have available as an economic development organization? Or how can we use our platform to advocate for additional capital to support more local, inclusive economic development and economic growth initiative? How do we make the case for capital? And I think right now, with these macro investments being announced, JP Morgan Chase and Nike and Facebook and everyone sort of announcing small business support, sort of capital. I think there's an opportunity for our economic development officials as well as philanthropy. Philanthropy, I believe, is changing and has really needs to be applauded for saying, we want to do something, so give us innovative ideas. We're taking risks. So now that there's capital there, it's incumbent upon us as economic development officials, community development leaders, and entrepreneurs to sort of make the request, to think about it differently, to say, all right, I know we've never done it like this. You've never given an entrepreneur a $50,000 grant. I know we've never given an existing business. We figured out how to do facade, sort of grants and loans, but we've never given a business additional capital. If they invest, we invest. That seems like private inurement or, unjust enrichment for an entrepreneur. But if we do it for the macro companies, why can't we do it for entrepreneurs and existing business owners and startups in our existing community? It's time to be bold in the ask of capital. That's my recommendation.
For most economic development organizations, they're not about development. They're about boosting organizations and recruiting them to a community. They're not about development. In addition, most economic development organizations have been an arm of racist hierarchy in cities. And so when you have essentially a cheerleader that's a booster for a biased chamber or something like that, you're going to get what you get. And so going double downing on Lanier's point, if you have authentic economic development organizations and professionals, you're going to seek to develop talent in areas that I do a lot of work on identifying underappreciated assets, meaning if you just add water, it will grow. And so a true development person can identify where the true growth potential is. And many cities, it's in Black firms in Black communities. Mm-hmm. That's where you can see incredible growth. And so we really do need to be critical that economic development was, for the most part, hasn't been about development. It's been about cheerleading and recruiting firms into a city and essentially being the arm of a power structure that has not wanted Black people in the community itself. So I'm very critical of economic development because a lot of these organizations, a lot of the people are not about Black people at all. I mean, never was, haven't been. And so we really do need to be critical. What are you doing as a organization? And one other thing, we do need new economic development organizations. We are not represented for the most part by the major economic development groups in cities. And so they are representing white business leaders for the most part. I mean, there are exceptions here and there, but we need new organizations that are focused on directing capital to develop firms. And so, yeah, I'll leave it there.
I just want to, we had a question on our list that ties into this that, Tish, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask because we really need to get this answer. And it parlays off of what Andre just ended with. But all three of you, what are some suggestions, knowing where Wilmington is in this process, in your experience? What are some suggestions that you could give local government to support entrepreneurs and this economic development process?
The first thing I'm going to say is pay for education.
Okay.
Pay for it. Pay for it. I absolutely believe in skin in the game, and an entrepreneur should give a little in order to feel like they belong there. That is important. So I'm not throwing that away at all. But when you're looking for quality people in the community, I talk about the Community Business Academy through Rising Tide.
Mm-hmm.
That Community Business Academy is a licensed, proven program. We're talking about a program that works through impact evaluation, like reduction in need for public assistance.
Yeah.
A 60% reduction in need for public assistance. Y'all got people on public assistance? Here's a solution that can work, right? And again, we're talking about getting past that break even. The problem is you have to really think about business education holistically. It's not always going to be a midday activity. And sometimes if it is, and this is what I learned founding the DC Women's Business Center, if it's going to be a 6 to 9, 3-hour, weekly meeting, you are not only going to feed those people, you're also going to have a homework center. You're also going to feed those children.
Yeah.
All of that has to happen. And downtown DC, the meters start being free, right, at 6:30. So recognize that there are going to be some people in that class that don't walk in the door until 6:35 because they're waiting for the free meters.
That's good.
Right? And daycare pickup starts at 4:45.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And for every minute you're late, there's $1 or call it whatever you want to do in that business model. Those are the types of things that I think we need to be serious about. We have to pay for business education of our entrepreneurs. We've missed so much in a very intentional way. The knowledge has been kept. The knowledge has been hoarded. Education is an asset, and there has been asset hoarding. My brothers Lanier and Andre just said that. So in order to really make that change, I really think that we need to invest in that business education. I'm going to now pass it over to Lanier to talk about the capital.
The money. You must have heard it's about the money. So I for the last 7 years, I lead the Rutgers Center for Urban Entrepreneurship and Economic Development. We've helped over 500 entrepreneurs, 70% are entrepreneurs of color, 50% are women. Right? Here's what I started to feel like a couple years ago, that the capacity building work we did without capital was sort of like workforce development without a job. Right? So clearly we got to continue to do capacity building and entrepreneurship education. But what I know is true is that first 25, 50, even $100,000 of capital, patient, flexible equity capital, to the extent that can be provided by government, philanthropy, any of that is necessary, or private sector. We formed our angel fund just because we were like, look, they're promising companies, but we need people to get that first $25,000 or $50,000 of capital so they can get some customer validation, get their product done, somehow get their idea implemented. That's a role that I think local government and local economic development, if it just changed this frame of reference, say, all right, Chicago Community Trust in Chicago is doing it now. They're doing up to $100,000 of just pre-development grants. To private sector as well, right?
I want to lean on grants. I just want to lean on pre-development grants.
Right.
And I keep saying like that.
Right.
It's not more debt. It's not more debt. And so that's the systemic change that I think local economic development organizations could say, what have we put together? Pick whatever the number is. I don't know what number is large or not. $1 million, $10 million, something that says we're going to invest in our local entrepreneurs. we're going to create a structure where we can hear ideas and, and make some investment, make some bets on people that we think have a high probability of success. And it doesn't mean they have to be growth, the next, the unicorns or zebras or whatever you want to call it. It is, can we help people, be able to create enterprises that, A, can employ themselves, but then B, can start to employ other people in our community? Can we help our existing, businesses expand, open a new location, add a vehicle or drive-through or different, online platform? That's something local economic development, government, and philanthropy can do today.
Yeah.
And it just takes force of will and and willingness, right?
And the answer to this question, because this is what I've gotten a lot of pushback on around grants, Lanier, and just paying for actual business education, is, well, what's the return on the investment, right? This idea that someone is actually throwing money away if they're supporting, right, Black-owned businesses or businesses of low wealth entrepreneurs, that these entrepreneurs don't know what to do with the money. These entrepreneurs don't deserve the money.
Here's something I really wish we could do. I know we don't have time, but it's one of those things I love to work on something like this with Andre. Like when you think about all of the other ROI measures, right? I read once that it costs $70,000 a year to incarcerate a person. So I always thought, if I just drew a circle around the little project I'm working on, and if last year 10 people were incarcerated in that circle, and this year, 8 people were incarcerated, that's $140,000 economic impact. That doesn't show up in my model, right? More people going to finishing high school, going to college in that circle. It doesn't show up in our model, right? 3 other people opening businesses as a result of the traffic that we've created on this corridor. That sort of return of investment if that can get communicated and incorporated into our return on investment analysis, I think to use Tamar's earlier point, it gives us another data point about economic return. That's not just about, the 5 or 6 or 8% or 18% sort of, direct financial return on investments, right? There are all of these other investments we got to figure out how to do.
That would be powerful.
Can I just add a few more things? Because and Lanier brought up a great point, because we actually, when we look at inclusive activity, we actually see that as risk. And when you're talking about capital, getting in capital, it's like investors see anything in inclusion as risk, when actually we should be reducing the risk when we're reducing interest rates when we're lending in specific areas with specific causes like that, because you're actually improving the community, you're improving the capacity of the community. But there are some concrete ways cities, and particularly in this time, they really have to look at supplier diversity. Remember, one of the tragedies that the federal government, and not necessarily city level, did during COVID, they eliminated their affirmative action policies on contracts for Black, Brown, and Asian businesses. And so they said, we're going to eliminate this for a period. And that was the exact opposite thing you should do. You should double down, because this is the moment you're seeing trillions of dollars being poured out the door. This is really the only time you can build or see this kind of wealth transfer. In addition, cities have to have a targeted effort to convert sole proprietorships into employer businesses, so they can participate as suppliers for in various projects. And they can help do that by creating various zones and initiatives where they're directing capital in the way that Lanier suggested. And so cities have a lot of room they could do. And let's not forget, Wilmington and other municipalities, they should use their community development block grants. There's a lot of flexibility there. They can actually invest directly into businesses with those funds if they choose to. And so for me, cities are an important vehicle for directing capital, creating customer base, doing so many different things, providing real estate for Black, brown-led businesses. So there's a lot of things cities can do to improve the situation.
And I just want to put a bright highlight under supplier diversity. And, you know, at the DC Women's Business Center, when someone asked me, well, what did you do there? What was, you know, the best thing that you learned? I say, well, I learned how to make millionaires. And they say, well, how'd you do that? Supplier diversity is how we did that.
Yeah.
That's how we did that. I mean, again, DC is the seat of government. So feds, of which, you know, at the time you could actually walk into a supplier diversity office, which is difficult in different areas, but the feds and the local government, that's how we did it. Supplier diversity is how we made millionaires. And only 2%, barely 2% of women-owned businesses even hit the $1 million revenue mark. The fact that we had 4% of our businesses over $1 million in revenue, we obviously were doing something special, which was not. It was all through procurement, supplier diversity. And I'm going to go beyond government, and I'm going to say government, your anchor institutions, right? Those colleges, those universities, those hospital centers, all of those anchor institutions should also be, you know, a part of this supplier diversity solution, because, you know, as Lanier mentioned, right, workforce without a job.
Yeah.
So you're trained, you get your capital, now you need your opportunity.
Thank you, guys. This was awesome and extremely powerful. Tish, do you have? I think we have time for one more question.
Okay, I have one more, and I think this one, Dr. Perry should start.
Okay.
As we begin to identify underappreciated assets and opportunities for growth, how can we push political and business leaders to shift their ideas around what community development looks like? And then to take that a step further, how do we begin to educate community members that there are assets in their neighborhoods that can be used to build wealth for them versus building wealth for investors?
You know what? I was going to say, make sure you get a copy of Know Your Price, Valuing Black Lives and Property in American Life. But I will say this, my work has become a lot easier because people hit the streets. And people said, you know, enough is enough. And we're going to vote. We're going to get the people who will create the kind of action that we need, and we're going to demand it. You know, the reason why I named the book Know Your Price, my favorite play in the whole wide world is Two Trains Running by August Wilson. And in the play, the main character, Memphis, is about to have his property seized through eminent domain. And the main character, Memphis, goes, no, I'm not selling my property for $15,000. I know my price. I got my price. I'm paraphrasing, but it's a refrain throughout the play. There's another character, Hambone, who agrees to paint a fence for a proprietor in exchange for a ham. He paints the fence. He never gets his ham. And throughout the play, he goes, give me my ham, give me my ham. And we don't know if he had mental illness before he painted the fence, but he eventually goes crazy and dies. But there was actually a happy ending. The main character, Memphis, gets $35,000 for his property, well above the original ask, and it's assumed he's getting the white rate or the market rate. Now, the moral of the story here is know that you have worth. What I try to do with my research is give the people the price to stand on, even if it means going crazy and dying. A lot of what we're talking about is about demanding our value in any way we can. If it's voting, if it's writing letters, if it's going to city council meetings, if it's hitting the streets, at some point, we got to demand our proper value.
This was awesome. Thank you guys so much. And when I opened up, I really want to thank you for your dedication, making this your life work. I know that, you know, there are sacrifices that are made when you decide to, you know, focus on a community and do everything that you can to build it. So I just want to publicly thank you from our community for your dedication and fulfilling your life's work. At this time, I believe Renata's going to come up and close us out. If you're on here and you're from Wilmington, thank you guys for joining us. And I really hope that you are stirred up. I really hope that you guys are stirred up and ready to take the notes that you did take and the inspiration and the insight, and more importantly, the exact steps that were given to help us come together and begin to implement these things. Because I really, like I said before, this is the perfect time for Wilmington. It cannot go another day. Like, the time is now. And so I'm waiting for Renata to come up.
Thank you to our national speakers and our moderator for this lively Q&A and participation in our 2021 Yes Wilmington Summit. This event could not happen without hard work of a small yet mighty team working behind the scenes. Thank you to Emily, Jen, and Tish for all your hard work. And thank you to Chris Bruce and the entire team of King Creative. I hope we are all walking away with tangible solutions and fire in our bellies to make them reality. I know I am. To quote Lanier Richardson, this is the moment of action, without apology. We are strong, Wilmington strong. Thank you.